Chapter 1. The hottest days were June and July. The scorching sun and scorching weather made the entire earth seem like a big furnace. Iron Ox Town. It was noon and the sun was high in the sky. Phew. On a long stone staircase. Qin Feiyang was walking up step by step. He was sweating all over and panting like an ox. The stone staircase slanted upwards at a 45-degree angle. There were a total of 999 steps leading to a huge palace. Every step was scorching hot under the scorching sun. Sweat dripped down and evaporated instantly. It made a sizzling sound. Qin Feiyang was only a 15-year-old youth, but he had maturity and steadiness that his peers did not have. He was 1.75 meters tall and slightly thin. His facial features were handsome, but his face was pale and bloodless. He gave people the feeling that he was a weak youth who was sick. No, not like. He was a sick person. And he was terminally ill. His life would end in 5 days. With 999 steps and this bad weather, even a normal person would not be able to reach the top, let alone a sick person like him. But stepping on this stone staircase was his only chance to survive. In fact, it could even change the fate of his life. 5 years ago, Qin Feiyang was the prince of the great Qin Empire. He had a noble status and extraordinary talent. At the age of 10, he had already become a 9-star martial master. At that time, he was known as a monster that only appeared once in 10,000 years. It could be said that he was the son that everyone looked up to since he was young. Among all the princes, he was the one who had the most hope to inherit the throne. He was also the favorite prince of the emperor. But, just as he was in his prime, with many halos around him, a sudden change suddenly came. Because of this change, he was forced by others to swallow the disaster spirit pill, and was then ruthlessly expelled from the imperial palace, the great Qin Empire, and wandered to Iron Ox Town. The disaster spirit pill was an extremely vicious pill. Once taken, not only would one lose their cultivation and be unable to cultivate in the future, but they would also be plagued by illness all day long, and could only live to 15 years old. In 5 days he would be 15 years old. 5 years had passed. The great Qin Empire was still standing on this continent with the posture of a king, dominating all directions. What about him? In order to survive, he struggled bitterly here. He refused to accept this. He'd sworn countless times in his heart that he would return to the Grand Qin Empire one day, and make all those people who'd wronged him pay the price. The palace at the top of the stone steps was his only hope. Gradually, his legs were weak and sore. Every step up was extremely strenuous for him. He was sweating profusely, and he was already dehydrated. His lips were dry and cracked, and strands of blood appeared. He began to feel dizzy. He stopped at the top of a flight of stairs and gasped for air, trying to recover his lost strength. In the meantime, he looked at the top of the stone stairs, and a determined light appeared in his weak eyes. At the end of the stone staircase, a majestic hall stood there. It was golden and dazzling, and it was incomparably imposing. The doors of the palace were tightly shut. Beside him stood a black stone tablet that was more than 10 meters tall. There were 2 eye-catching words engraved on it. The Pill Hall. It was forceful, and it faintly revealed a strand of awe-inspiring oppressive force. This was a place that countless people dreamt of entering. That was because there were all kinds of medicinal pills here. Some medicinal pills could cure hundreds of poisons and diseases, and ensure a lifetime of peace. Some medicinal pills could cleanse the body, allowing one to be reborn, and step onto the path of cultivation. There were even rumors that some legendary medicinal pills not only had life, but also could allow one to fly and overturn the seas. If one was lucky enough to consume it, he or she would become a god that was worshipped by the world overnight. Therefore, the Pill Hall was a very sacred place. Every disciple of the Pill Hall was an existence that people respected. Even the lowest level alchemist would have countless people flattering and currying favor with them, just to get a medicinal pill. Qin Feiyang's goal was a medicinal pill called Marrow Cleansing Pill. The Marrow Cleansing Pill was the key to his rebirth. In order to get the Marrow Cleansing Pill, even he didn't know how many times he had come here. However, every time he couldn't reach the top and reach the Pill Hall because of his illness. But this time he couldn't retreat, and he couldn't give up. because 5 days later he would die. If he wanted to live, he had to reach the top. He took a step forward with difficulty, gritted his teeth, and continued to climb. Bang! At this moment, the closed door of the palace quickly opened. A woman in her 30s, wearing a red dress, walked out of the palace. She stood at the edge, looking down at Qin Feiyang, and said calmly, "Qin Feiyang, count yourself, how many times have you been here? Don't you know how to give up?" Qin Feiyang didn't answer. He lowered his head, gritted his teeth, and continued to climb. He would see this woman every time he came here. Her name was Ma Hongmei, the deacon elder of the Pill Hall. Of course, she was also an alchemist. Because of her identity as an alchemist, this woman was arrogant and didn't put anyone in her eyes. All these years, she had humiliated him a lot. Therefore, he was too lazy to speak, so as not to embarrass himself. However, his attitude made Ma Hongmei even angrier. She pursed her lips and said, "Don't say that I look down on you. No matter how many times you come, the result will be the same. Just be a jerk, don't be an eyesore here." "Elder Ma, you can close your eyes, don't look." Qin Feiyang stopped and raised his head to look at her. There was a trace of anger deep in his eyes. Ma Hongmei was so angry that she laughed and said, "Oh, you're still reasonable, right? Fine, I'll tell you clearly. Even if you reach the peak, I won't give you the marrow cleansing pill." Qin Feiyang couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. But in the end, he endured it and continued to climb. Because he had no choice. He had to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. Moreover, Ma Hongmei wasn't the only alchemist in the Pill Hall. He could find other alchemists. Time passed by. Was it because he was provoked by Ma Hongmei? Or was it because of his desire to live? In the following time he didn't stop, and gradually approached the peak. 2 hours later, he was only 50 steps away from the peak. Although he was physically and mentally weak, his head was dizzy, and every step he took, the muscles on his legs felt like they were being torn apart. However, his heart was burning. Only 50 steps left, and he would reach the peak. Reaching the peak meant a lot to him. Not only did it mean that he could survive, but it also meant that he could cultivate in the future. Only by becoming stronger could he be qualified to find the answers and solve the doubts in his heart. He looked at the peak with a firm gaze and high fighting spirit. This time he would definitely succeed. 40 steps, 30 steps, 20 steps, 10 steps. He reached the peak in one breath. His whole body lost its strength, and he lay on the ground, greedily breathing in the air. "Oh, what a miracle today. I actually let you climb up." Ma Hongmei didn't leave. Seeing Qin Feiyang reach the peak, she was quite surprised. But then a cold light flashed past her eyes, and she kicked Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was shocked and angry. "Elder Ma, what are you doing?" "Of course, I'm sending you down." Ma Hongmei laughed mockingly and kicked Qin Feiyang's chest. Bang! Bang! Immediately, Qin Feiyang was like a ball, rolling down the stone stairs with a painful scream. "Ma Hongmei, I curse you to die a horrible death!" He roared hysterically, full of resentment. He had finally reached the peak, but he didn't expect this woman to be so vicious. Wasn't this clearly cutting off his path of survival? "How dare you curse me? You really don't know what's good for you. I'll kill you now." Killing intent flashed in Ma Hongmei's eyes, and she was about to chase after him to eliminate him. What's going on? However, right at this moment, a shout filled with energy sounded from within the palace. Then, a middle-aged man walked out of the palace. He was 7 feet tall, wearing a purple robe, and walked with a majestic gait. His eyes were bright, and he was imposing without being angry. Ma Hongmei frowned, turned to the middle-aged man and bowed. "Greetings, Third Palace Master." The Third Palace Master nodded, looking at Qin Feiyang, who kept rolling down, and frowned. "Why is he here again?" Ma Hongmei smiled. "He wants the marrow cleansing elixir." The Third Palace Master was puzzled. Then why did he roll down? Ma Hongmei gloated. "It's all his own fault. Just now, I repeatedly advised him to stop climbing, but he didn't believe me. What happened in the end? He ran out of strength, his legs went soft, and he lost his balance and rolled down." When Qin Feiyang heard this, he was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Ma Hongmei sneered. This stone staircase had 999 steps. There was no way to survive if he rolled down like this. If no one saved him, she didn't need to do it herself. This little bastard would fall to his death. As the person involved, Qin Feiyang naturally knew this. But when he reached the peak, his body was already sore and weak, and his limbs couldn't move. Now he rolled down again, his head was bleeding, and his hands were broken. There was no way to stop. Am I going to die like this today? No. I must survive. I must return to the great Qin Empire alive. Those who betrayed me, I will make them pay 1,000 times, 10,000 times. Qin Feiyang roared crazily in his heart. His eyes turned blood red, as if they were dyed with blood. His body was full of hostility. Although his hands were broken, he still didn't give up. The unwillingness and anger in his heart turned into a source of strength. He suddenly turned over, facing the sky, and with his back against the stone staircase he slid down. His feet were like a pair of brakes, firmly pressing on the stone staircase. He wanted to use this method to reduce the impact and slow down the speed of his descent. 100 breaths later, he finally stopped, lying on the stone staircase. But his back, his feet, under the fierce friction with the stone staircase, had already been badly mutilated, and even his spine had been broken. The heart-wrenching pain was like a tide, hitting every nerve in his body. He was in so much pain that he wanted to die. Chapter 2. Qin Feiyang gritted his teeth and stood up stubbornly. He turned around with difficulty, and raised his head to look at the third palace master of the Pill Palace. He said word by word, "Third palace master, Ma Hongmei is lying. I've already reached the peak. She kicked me down." The third palace master frowned, and turned to look at Ma Hongmei with a questioning look. "You're really lucky to still be alive." Ma Hongmei humphed and said disdainfully, "What a joke. I'm the deacon elder of the Pill Palace. Why would I do such a despicable thing? Plus, I have no grudge against you. Why would I kick you?" Qin Feiyang was extremely angry. He almost went crazy. He looked at the third palace master and said, "I'm not lying. Please believe me. Don't blame others for your incompetence. If you want the marrow cleansing pill, you have to rely on your own ability." The third palace master glanced at Qin Feiyang indifferently. He turned around and entered the palace, disappearing without a trace. "Why? Why don't you believe me?" Qin Feiyang roared furiously. His entire body was filled with killing intent. "Why don't you take a look at yourself? Who would believe your nonsense? Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't spread rumors and create trouble. Otherwise, there will be no place for you in the Iron Ox town." Ma Hongmei smirked and left behind a threatening sentence. She turned around and walked into the Pill Palace. The door closed. Boom. The door was completely closed. Qin Feiyang stood on the stone stairs. He didn't move and stared at the Pill Palace. "I, Qin Feiyang, will return today's pain 100-fold in the future. Today my blood has dyed this stone stairs red. In the future, I will let my blood dye the entire Pill Palace red." At this moment, his face was distorted and his eyes were filled with killing intent. He looked like a ferocious beast. He looked extremely ferocious. After that, he turned around with difficulty and walked down the stairs. But after taking 2 steps, he started to lose consciousness and his body started to sway. Seeing that he was about to fall down, he bit his tongue. Blood flowed out and his consciousness became much clearer. Then, he kept biting his tongue. He almost bit it off. His pride didn't allow him to fall on the stone stairs. After an unknown amount of time, he finally walked down the stone stairs. Along the way, he had long since reached his limit. The moment his foot touched the ground, he directly fell to the ground, closed his eyes and fainted. Soon, a white-haired old man came in front of Qin Feiyang. Looking at Qin Feiyang lying in a pool of blood, his eyes turned slightly red. The old man raised his head and looked at the pill hall. A cold light flashed in his eyes. After that, he carried Qin Feiyang and ran out of the town along the street without saying anything. Iron Ox Town was a small town with a population of several tens of thousands. At this moment, it was almost evening. As the sun set, the weather gradually turned cold. The residents of the town walked out of their homes one after another. Some people wandered around the streets to buy some necessities. Some people gathered in groups of 2s and 3s, chatting about anything under the sun. There were also some people who formed groups and left Ironox Town to hunt in the deep mountains outside. After all, as long as one was human, they needed to live. The so-called life was nothing more than food and wealth. When these people saw Qin Feiyang and the old man, they all showed sympathy in their eyes. Obviously, the two of them weren't strangers in the town. Surrounding the town was an endless mountain range. There were wild beasts everywhere. It was extremely dangerous. Basically, no one dared to go in to hunt alone. However, the old man carried Qin Feiyang and went straight into the deep mountains in the east. He was familiar with the route and avoided the wild beasts along the way. After running for about 1 li, the old man appeared in front of a lake. The lake was about 100 zhang wide. The lake water was clear and rippled. A cool breeze blew gently, making people feel refreshed. Around the lake, willows swayed in the wind, releasing the vitality of youth. On the left, there was a small wooden building. It only had 2 floors. It didn't have a gorgeous appearance. It was simple and plain. However, it looked very warm, peaceful. This was Qin Feiyang's home. The old man carried him and walked into the small wooden building. He went up to the 2nd floor and entered a room. He gently placed Qin Feiyang on the bed. Then he hurriedly left the room. Soon, he came in with an iron basin and sat by the bed. He wrung out the towel and wiped the bloodstains on Qin Feiyang's body. After wiping, the old man looked at Qin Feiyang lovingly. His eyes were filled with tears and blurred his vision. No. Don't. Why? Why do you treat me so cruelly? What did I do wrong? Uncle Yuan, don't leave me. I only have you as my family now. Don't let me become an orphan. Qin Feiyang seemed to be having a nightmare. He suddenly roared and his face was full of pain. The old man hurriedly grabbed Qin Feiyang's hand and softly comforted. Feiyang, don't be afraid. Uncle Yuan didn't leave. Uncle Yuan will always be with you and will never leave. Until then, Qin Feiyang gradually calmed down. However, his tightly knitted brows didn't relax. Uncle Yuan looked at him and felt pain in his heart. Tears burst out of his eyes. Suddenly, he seemed to have made a decision. He suddenly got up and hurriedly went downstairs. Soon a low rumbling sound came from downstairs. No one knew what he was fiddling with. Not long after, he hurriedly returned to his room and sat by the bed. In his hand, there was a jade box and a dagger. The jade box was the size of a palm. It was pitch black and simple. However, Uncle Yuan looked at this jade box and his expression was somewhat excited. It has been 5 years since I left the Great Qin Empire. Feiyang, you have been in the Ironox Town for 5 years. In these 5 years, you have suffered countless humiliation. Every day is very painful, but because of this, your temperament is far beyond your peers. Your current perseverance, even I am ashamed of my inferiority. I believe that with your current ability, it is enough to take charge. Uncle Yuan muttered to himself. He put the dagger aside and opened the jade box. Wisps of rich fragrance immediately filled the room. Inside the jade box, there were a few pills lying quietly. A white pill, 2 red pills, 2 brown pills. These 5 pills were only the size of a pellet. The color was bright and flawless. A burst of fragrance assailed the nose, making people feel refreshed. Uncle Yuan gave Qin Feiyang a red pill and a brown pill. Gotcha. Not long after, Qin Feiyang's 2 arms and back, there was a sound of bones colliding. This was bone reattachment. Moreover, the wounds on his back and feet were also rapidly healing. In less than 2 hours, the wounds on his body began to scab. The broken bones had also been reattached, and were only waiting for recovery. Ma Hongmei, I am going to kill you. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang let out a loud roar. He suddenly turned over and sat up, causing the wooden bed to creak. His eyes shot out 2 blood-red rays of light. Ah! This violent action caused the wounds on his body that had already scabbed open again. Blood flowed out. The pain engulfed his body and mind. He couldn't help but scream. Uncle Yuan was also shocked. He hurriedly put down the wound and comforted. Feiyang, you have already gone home. With Uncle Yuan here, don't be afraid. Go home? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Enduring the pain all over his body, he glanced at this familiar room and breathed a sigh of relief. The bloody light in his eyes also quickly faded and turned into a pair of normal eyes. His pitch-black eyes were like ink, incomparably deep, and revealed strands of wise and far-sighted light. Seeing this, Uncle Yuan also let out a long sigh of relief. Qin Feiyang looked at the starry sky outside the window and asked, Uncle Yuan, how long have I been unconscious? Uncle Yuan said, about 4 to 6 hours. Fortunately, I still have time. Qin Feiyang whispered, turned to look at Uncle Yuan and smiled. Uncle Yuan, don't worry, I will definitely find a way to find the marrow-cleansing pill and try my best to survive. Uncle Yuan was stunned. This kid actually came to comfort him? Qin Feiyang suddenly frowned. He looked at his 2 arms in bewilderment. He clearly remembered that his injuries were very serious. But now, even the broken bones had been reattached. As the saying goes, it takes 100 days to recover from a serious injury, but only 4 to 6 hours had passed. Could it be that after he was unconscious, Uncle Yuan gave him some kind of divine pill? Uncle Yuan, what's going on? He raised his head and asked Uncle Yuan, but found that Uncle Yuan lowered his head and frowned. He didn't know what he was thinking, but he looked very engrossed. He couldn't help but have a trace of doubt in his eyes, and was about to ask, Shoo. Uncle Yuan suddenly put his finger to his mouth and made a gesture to him to keep quiet. Then, Uncle Yuan walked to the window, as if he was admiring the night scenery. At this time, it was already late at night. The full moon hung high in the sky and the stars flickered. It was quiet all around. Uncle Yuan keenly caught a burst of weak rustling sounds. Suddenly, he found 2 black shadows in a bush 500 meters away. A cold light flashed in his old eyes. Uncle Yuan turned and walked to Qin Feiyang and whispered, Feiyang, someone wants to harm us. Someone? Qin Feiyang was shocked. Uncle Yuan said, in these 5 years, we have been enduring silently and have never formed any grudges with anyone. If I'm not wrong, it should be Ma Hongmei who sent them. Qin Feiyang was shocked. She wants to silence me? Uncle Yuan said, that's right, if the matter of her kicking you down the stone stairs is spread out, even if no one believes it, it will still cause her some unnecessary trouble. So she won't let you live past tonight. Qin Feiyang clenched his teeth. This woman is really vicious. The human heart is sinister. No matter who you meet in the future, you have to be careful, just in case. Uncle Yuan warned. Qin Feiyang nodded his head and deeply remembered these words in his heart. Uncle Yuan grabbed the jade box and placed it in his bosom. He then grabbed the dagger and asked, Feiyang, do you want to kill them? Yes. Qin Feiyang replied without hesitation. Do you dare to kill them? Uncle Yuan asked again. This time Qin Feiyang hesitated, because in his life he had never killed anyone. Think about how you were chased out of the great Qin Empire. Think about how you survived all these years. Think about how Ma Hongmei treated you today. Every word that Uncle Yuan said was like a sharp blade, ruthlessly stabbing into Qin Feiyang's heart. He painfully closed his eyes, his face twisted, and suddenly opened his eyes. He nodded. Uncle Yuan, I dare. Chapter 3. I dare. As these 2 words left his mouth, the blood in Qin Feiyang's body seemed to be ignited and boiling. Uncle Yuan handed the dagger in his hand to Qin Feiyang and said, Take it. Later, you have to stab it into their hearts. Qin Feiyang took the dagger and looked puzzled. This dagger was pure white, as if it was carefully carved from ivory. It was suffused with a layer of treasure light, giving him the feeling that it was not a weapon, but a work of art. Uncle Yuan said, I know that you must have a lot of questions in your heart. After killing those 2, I will slowly tell you. Qin Feiyang nodded and did not ask any more questions. He got up with difficulty. At the same time, Uncle Yuan blew out the candle flame, and the whole room suddenly fell into darkness. The candle flame is out. It seems that they are already asleep. Let's go. 2 black shadows walked out from the bush and quietly came to the front of the wooden house. They looked up at the 2nd floor and directly crossed the fence and walked towards the door. Uncle Yuan asked in a low voice. Feiyang, did you see it? The two were standing next to the window and peeping. The whole process was seen by their eyes. Qin Feiyang said, I saw it. Uncle Yuan said, they are 2-star martial artists. You are still very weak. When they enter the room, you must kill them in one blow. Otherwise, the one who dies in the end will be you. Understood. Qin Feiyang nodded and moved behind the door. Like a beast, he bared his fangs and waited for the opportunity to move. Uncle Yuan retreated to the side and watched. He did not have the slightest intention to help. The first step of the cultivation path was divided into martial artist, martial master, and martial ancestor. Each realm was divided into 9 stars. Martial artist was the door frame of cultivation. 10 years ago, Qin Feiyang was a 9-star martial master, and was only 1 step away from martial ancestor. If there was no sudden change, the current him would probably be a martial ancestor. He would still be the most dazzling star of the great Qin Empire. Although he had already lost all of this, he did not give up. He firmly believed that man can conquer nature. As long as he worked hard, he would be able to return strong sooner or later. Creak. A weak sound of the door opening came from downstairs. Qin Feiyang felt a chill in his heart. To be honest, he was still quite nervous. His palms were sweating. The strength of an ordinary person's fist was at most 200 to 300 pounds. However, as long as one embarks on the path of cultivation, one can break through the limits and possess even more strength. For example, a 1-star martial artist had the strength of a bear. A 2-star martial artist had the strength of 2 bears. The strength of a bear was equal to 500 pounds. In other words, the 2 shadows that were climbing the stairs had the strength to split a mountain. What about him? Now, not only was his body weak and sickly, he was also seriously injured. Facing 2 2-star martial artists, even if it was a sneak attack, he did not seem to have any chance of winning. You have to believe in Uncle Yuan. In this world, anyone can harm me, but Uncle Yuan won't. This dagger is definitely not an ordinary item. The faint sound of footsteps came from afar and approached the door of the room. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself. He tightened his grip on the dagger and held his breath. Feiyang, killing enemies in adversity can make you more mature and steady. After killing these 2 people, Uncle Yuan will give you the marrow cleansing elixir and let you regain your former glory. Uncle Yuan clenched his fists and muttered to himself in his heart. Creak. Finally, the door was pushed open. 2 shadows tiptoed into the room. At this moment, Qin Feiyang was like a furious lion. He raised the dagger in his hand and stabbed towards the back of the person behind him. Under the moonlight, the blade of the dagger shone with a terrifying cold light. Ah! Gotcha! The dagger was astonishingly sharp. It easily cut through the person's skin and hit the heart. Screams could be heard. It's so sharp. At the same time, as he used too much force, Qin Feiyang's bones that had just been reconnected broke again. The sharp pain made him break out in cold sweat. However, he was very excited. The sharpness of the dagger was far beyond his imagination. He endured the sharp pain. The other hand grabbed the dagger. Like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey, he pounced on the person in front of him. Murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He stabbed the dagger into the person's back. Gotcha! His arm was broken once again. Everything happened too suddenly. Before the 2 shadows could react, they breathed their last and fell to the ground. Uncle Yuan took out a match and lit the candle. The room was lit up again. 2 corpses were seen lying on the ground. Blood was gushing out. Their eyes were wide open. They were filled with fear and despair before death. There was also deep disbelief. When they came, they were very confident. They even felt that the sneaky assassination was somewhat redundant. Given their abilities as 2-star martial artists, they could easily kill the 2 of them. However, they never expected that they would die under Qin Feiyang's dagger. Until death, they could not figure out what was going on. Qin Feiyang stood in front of the 2 corpses. The dagger in his hand was already stained with blood. Drops of blood were constantly dripping from the tip of the dagger. His body and face were also stained with blood. At this moment, he looked like a blood-soaked Azura. 2 broken arms hung weakly in front of his chest. He was panting heavily. His face was extremely pale. Clang clang. The blood-stained dagger fell from his hand and hit the wooden plank. There was an ear-piercing sound of metal. He quivered and looked up at Uncle Yuan, who was standing beside the candle flame. Uncle Yuan, did you see that? I killed them. I did it. Uncle Yuan nodded. His old eyes were filled with gratification. Crackle, crackle, crackle. But at this moment, the sound of firewood burning suddenly entered their ears. Immediately after, the two of them only felt a wave of heat sweeping towards them. Uncle Yuan's expression changed. He hurried to the window and saw that the firewood piled up in the small courtyard had all started to burn. The fire was fierce and it was a few meters high. The hot and dry weather made everything extremely dry. The shrubs and weeds around the wooden building were quickly ignited. The fire spread rapidly. In the blink of an eye, this place turned into a sea of fire. The pungent smoke and the scorching heat shrouded the entire wooden building. The wooden building was also being engulfed by the fire. How could this be? Qin Feiyang walked with difficulty to Uncle Yuan's side. When he saw the situation outside, he was instantly shocked. Hee, let's see how you're going to escape this time. An ear-piercing sneer came from outside. Qin Feiyang and Uncle Yuan looked towards the source of the sound. Their eyes were filled with intense killing intent at the same time. Under the hazy moonlight, a middle-aged man in black clothes stood by the lakeside. He crossed his arms and looked at them with a cold smile. Uncle Yuan raised his eyebrows and asked, "Who sent you here?" The middle-aged man said indifferently, "Seeing that you're about to be burned alive, I'll tell you. It's Elder Ma from the Pill Palace who wants your lives." Uncle Yuan said, "She actually sent 2 groups of people to kill us. She really put in a lot of effort." The middle-aged man said, "There's no other way. You can only blame yourself for offending someone you shouldn't have. I'll return your words to you. In less than 3 days, you'll be dead." Uncle Yuan's eyes flickered. He turned around and grabbed the dagger on the ground. Then he carried Qin Feiyang and quickly ran downstairs. 3 days. The middle-aged man was stunned. Then he raised the corner of his mouth and looked at them with disdain. It was as if he was looking at a clown. "Uncle Yuan, the wooden building is already surrounded by the sea of fire. How are we going to get out?" Qin Feiyang asked. After the baptism of blood, he didn't panic at all in this desperate situation. Instead, he was calm and steady. "I'll bring you to a place." Uncle Yuan ran down the stairs. He didn't leave the wooden building. Instead, he went straight into the kitchen at the back. The kitchen was simple, but it was clean and tidy. He walked to a corner and pressed his old hand on the wall. The place immediately caved in. Rumble. Accompanied by a low rumble, a crack appeared on the ground beside his feet. There was actually a secret room underground. The secret room wasn't big. It was only about 3 meters wide. In the center, there was a green stone table. It was as flat as a mirror. The stone table was empty. In addition, there was nothing in the secret room except for the green stone table. Uncle Yuan jumped down and landed in the secret room. After placing Qin Feiyang flat on the stone platform, he turned around and walked to the front of a wall. His big hand pressed against the wall, and the entrance at the top quickly closed. After doing all this, Uncle Yuan let out a sigh of relief. He walked to Qin Feiyang's side and said with a smile, "Don't worry, the walls of the secret room are all made from a very special kind of stone. It has the effect of insulating heat and cold. Rest assured and recuperate here." Qin Feiyang nodded and looked at Uncle Yuan without blinking. After this series of changes, he suddenly felt that the old man in front of him was covered with a layer of veil. He couldn't see through him. He asked, "Are you really Uncle Yuan?" Uncle Yuan smiled and said, "Silly boy, if I'm not Uncle Yuan, who else can I be?" Qin Feiyang said, "But why do I feel that you're so unfamiliar now?" Uncle Yuan was silent. Outside, the wooden building was already engulfed in flames. The fire waves reached dozens of feet high and illuminated half the sky. Everything was quickly turning into ashes in the raging fire. Mission completed. The middle-aged man smiled coldly and turned around to leave. Soon, he blended into the forest and disappeared without a trace. In the secret room, seeing that Uncle Yuan was silent, Qin Feiyang gradually lost his patience and asked, Uncle Yuan, can you tell me now? Don't be anxious. Let me show you something first. Uncle Yuan smiled and took out a jade box from his bosom. He opened the lid and 3 pellet-sized medicinal pills immediately appeared in Qin Feiyang's line of sight. These are pills. Qin Feiyang was shocked. He looked at Uncle Yuan in disbelief. That's right. Uncle Yuan nodded and said with a smile. Originally, there were 5 pills. 2 bone-replenishing pills, 2 healing pills, and the last one was the marrow-cleansing pill. What? Qin Feiyang's body trembled. Uncle Yuan actually had the marrow-cleansing pill. Then why didn't he give it to him all these years? Uncle Yuan did not have the intention to explain. He smiled and said, Earlier, I gave you the bone-replenishing pill and healing pill. The effect is not over yet, so you don't need to take it anymore. Speaking till here, Uncle Yuan took out the white pill and continued. Wait till your injuries are healed, then swallow this marrow-cleansing pill. At that time, you will be able to display your talent to your heart's content, and make those who once looked down on you dumbfounded. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up as he looked at the pill. When he thought about how he was about to remove the poison of the disaster pill, his heart was excited. Uncle Yuan smiled and said, Have a good sleep first. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded and abandoned all distracting thoughts. He closed his eyes and quickly fell asleep. This time, he slept especially peacefully and soundly. Even between his eyebrows, a trace of a smile could be seen. Uncle Yuan's eyes were filled with love and his face was full of smiles. But suddenly, the love in his eyes disappeared and was replaced by strands of cold light. Ma Hongmei, if it was in the past, I would have killed you when you kicked Feiyang down the stone stairs. But now I won't. I will wait for Feiyang to wake up, and let him chop off your head with his own hands. I will use your blood to dye the Pill Palace red. At this moment. Chapter 4. The fire burned for 2 hours before gradually extinguishing. The land within a radius of a few hundred meters was burned to ashes. A light breeze blew, and black ashes fluttered in the sky, covering the moonlight and starlight. Rumble. A certain part of the ground cracked open, and Yuanbo jumped out, scanning the surroundings. The fire had just been extinguished, and the heat waves were rolling, enough to roast a person, but Yuanbo was in the middle of the heat waves, not affected at all. Suddenly, he waved his sleeves, and a strong wind blew in this place. The rolling heat waves in this void quickly surged into the distance. After this place cooled down, he raised his head to look at the starry sky, and his old eyes revealed a touch of sadness, a touch of gratification, and a touch of reluctance. For the entire night he did not sleep, guarding Qin Feiyang. Early morning. The sun slowly rose. Qin Feiyang finally woke up from his deep sleep. This night, he did not have any more nightmares and was unprecedentedly at ease. And after a night of recuperation, the wounds on his body had basically healed, and only the blood scars were left. The 2 broken arms had also been reconnected, and as long as he did not use too much strength, there would not be a big problem. Qin Feiyang got up and moved his muscles and bones, and said in shock, The effect of the pill is indeed extraordinary. If there was no bone-replenishing pill and healing pill, it would probably take at least a month before he could get out of bed. Swish. Yuanbo jumped into the secret room, looked up and down at Qin Feiyang, and said with a smile, You've recovered well. Qin Feiyang scratched his head, and asked impatiently, Yuanbo, can you give me the cleansing marrow pill? Look at how anxious you are. Yuanbo shook his head and laughed. He took out a jade box from his chest, and handed the white pill to Qin Feiyang. This is the cleansing marrow pill. Qin Feiyang's hands were trembling as he took the pill. 5 years. For the cleansing marrow pill, he struggled in Iron Ox Town for 5 whole years. Failure after failure, despair after despair, humiliation after humiliation after humiliation. If it were anyone else, they would have collapsed long ago. But he never thought of giving up. He always believed that opportunities were left to those who worked hard. The heavens did not disappoint those who persevered. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Uncle Yuan sighed deeply and said with a smile, Feiyang, you won't blame Uncle Yuan, right? Qin Feiyang said, Although I don't know why you did this, Uncle Yuan, No matter what the reason is, I won't blame you. But Uncle Yuan felt rather guilty in his heart and said with a smile, quickly consume it. Qin Feiyang nodded. He sat down, looked at the medicinal pill in his hand, took a deep breath, and popped it into his mouth. Pills. It melted in the mouth. It transformed into a majestic energy that surged towards his limbs and bones, cleansing every inch of his flesh and blood, every cell, including his internal organs and bones. Gradually, wisps of dark red liquid gushed out of his pores. This was the poison left in his body after consuming the spiritual disaster pill. As the toxins were expelled, Qin Feiyang could clearly feel that his body was gradually changing. Time passed by slowly. Half an hour later, his entire body was covered in a dark red liquid that emitted a pungent stench. Puff! Suddenly, his body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood that he spat out was also dark red. It was also at this moment that he opened his eyes. His eyes were shining brightly and were exceptionally spirited. Finally! Qin Feiyang clenched his hands tightly, feeling the strength that was rapidly recovering in his body. He was so excited that he couldn't speak. The heavens didn't kill me, I've finally been reborn. He suddenly stood up, his gaze passing through the entrance of the secret room, looking at the sky, and roaring continuously, spreading in all directions. Tears gushed out of his eyes. For 5 years, every day felt like a year to him. That nightmare was like a curse that haunted him at all times, and he couldn't get rid of it. Ever since he was expelled from the Great Qin Empire, he had never had a good night's sleep. Every night, he would be awakened by nightmares. But in the future, he would no longer have nightmares, because his fate had already changed. He already had the qualifications to fight back. Although he was still very weak now, to the extent that in the eyes of those people, he was even less than an insignificant ant, but he believed that one day, he would be able to openly step into the imperial capital of the Great Qin Empire, and take back everything that belonged to him. Uncle Yuan was full of smiles and didn't disturb him. In these 5 years, he had seen all the grievances that Qin Feiyang had suffered. Now that he had been reborn with great difficulty, he would give him some time to properly vent. At the same time, in a place hundreds of meters away, there was a forest. A young girl of 14 or 15 years old was running while panting. Although she was still young, her skin was whiter than snow, and her facial features were exquisite. Her jet black and beautiful long hair was tied up with a white ribbon. She was wearing a set of black tight clothes that vividly showed off the young girl's figure. At the same time, she appeared valiant and very capable. But at this moment, her smooth forehead was tightly wrinkled, and her clear and bright eyes were filled with worry. Big brother Feiyang, I stole a lot of medicinal pills from home. You must wait for me, she kept muttering. In her hand, she was holding an exquisite cloth bag. This was a Qianquan bag. Just like its name, there was a universe inside, and it was specially used to store things. Suddenly, she stopped and looked at the sky. A long howl could be faintly heard. It's Big Brother Feiyang's voice. Strange, the people in town are saying that he was seriously injured and unconscious, and was carried back by Uncle Yuan. Why did he wake up so quickly? What is he shouting about? The young girl in tight clothes continued to run towards the direction of the lake with a stomach full of doubts. After running out of the forest, she raised her head and looked at the shore of the lake. Her face suddenly turned pale. How could this be? Big Brother Feiyang, Uncle Yuan, where are you? I am Yi, come out quickly, she shouted anxiously as she ran. In the secret room, when Uncle Yuan heard the shout, a smile crawled up his old face. Carrying Qin Feiyang, he jumped out and landed on the ground saying, Feiyang, quickly go wash up, don't let Yi see you in such a sorry state. Take the dagger, and wash it while you're at it. Qin Feiyang took the dagger, looked up at the young girl who ran over, and smiled. This girl came really fast. After that, he glanced at the black ash on the ground, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He ran towards the lake and plunged into the cool lake water. He suddenly felt hale and hearty. One word to describe it, cool. At the same time, Uncle Yuan stomped his foot hard, and the ground collapsed. In an instant, the secret room was buried by mud. Then with a smile he greeted the girl. The girl's name was Lin Yi. She was the pearl of the family master of Iron Bull Town's Lin family. She was also the first friend that Qin Feiyang made after coming to Iron Bull Town. Their relationship was very good. Lin Yi ran to Uncle Yuan. Before she could catch her breath, she asked, "Uncle Yuan, what's going on?" Uncle Yuan smiled bitterly and said, "Last night, Uncle Yuan accidentally knocked over the candlelight and burned everything here." Lin Yi was furious and hurriedly said, "Are you and Big Brother Feiyang injured? I brought a lot of medicinal pills. You can see if there's anything useful." As she said, she handed the Cosmos bag in her hand to Uncle Yuan. No need, no need. Feiyang and I are fine." Uncle Yuan waved his hand with a smile. After that he frowned again and asked, Tell Uncle Yuan honestly, did you get your father's permission to take these medicinal pills?" Lin Yi shook her head and said, "My father has always been prejudiced against you. If I ask him for it, he will definitely not give it to me. I sneaked out when he wasn't paying attention." You are too presumptuous. You actually stole the medicinal pills from the family." As soon as the voice fell, an angry shout rang out. "Oh no, why did my father follow me?" Lin Yi's body stiffened, and her face turned pale. Uncle Yuan looked at the source of the voice and saw a middle-aged man in white striding towards them. His face was full of anger. "The visitor is not friendly." Uncle Yuan sighed secretly. He turned to look at Lin Yi and smiled. "Don't be nervous. Uncle Yuan will explain for you." Lin Yi nodded. She was still a little worried and scared. She didn't even dare to look at her father. Uncle Yuan greeted and smiled. "Family Master Lin, long time no see." Family Master Lin stopped and frowned. "Am I familiar with you?" Uncle Yuan's expression stiffened. He smiled and said, "Family Master Lin, anger is harmful to your body. Please calm down." Family Master Lin said, "I don't want to talk nonsense with you. Let me ask you. You stole the medicinal pills from the family. Is it for Qin Feiyang?" Uncle Yuan nodded. "I knew it. It's really hard to guard against a thief in the family. After we go back, see how I will deal with you." Family Master Lin glared at Yi fiercely and looked at Uncle Yuan. "Yi is still young and insensible. But you are already so old. Don't tell me you are also insensible. Do you know how precious medicinal pills are? It is a waste to use it on Qin Feiyang." Uncle Yuan frowned and said, "Family Master Lin, I have always respected you. Please respect others." The Lin family's patriarch said disdainfully, "Respect also depends on who the person is. Scoundrels like you and Qin Feiyang are simply scurrying rats. For me to stand here and talk to you is already giving you enough face." Uncle Yuan clenched his hands tightly, making cracking sounds. Lin Yi mustered up her courage, looked up at her father, and said, "Father, Uncle Yuan and Brother Feiyang are both upright gentlemen. They are not rascals." "Shut up." Family Master Lin was furious and shouted, "Refuting me in front of him. Do you want to rebel?" "I dare not." Lin Yi lowered her head again. She was so aggrieved that tears flowed out. "Umph." Family Master Lin snorted from his nose, looked at Uncle Yuan coldly and said, "Qin Yuan, let me tell you. From today onwards, you and Qin Feiyang can forget about getting anything from Yi." "Lin Yi, why are you still standing there? Go now." "Yes." Lin Yi responded. She lowered her head and walked toward her father. "Family Master Lin, please wait." At this moment, Qin Feiyang walked out from behind a willow tree. The dirt on his body had been washed away, but his clothes were burned by the fire. He was still wearing the original tattered clothes. At this moment, his face was a little gloomy. Originally, he sneaked ashore and wanted to give Lin Yi a surprise, but he did not expect to hear this. Uncle Yuan was his only family member now. He could be humiliated, but he would never allow anyone to humiliate Uncle Yuan. Uncle Yuan pulled Qin Feiyang and said, "Feiyang, forget it. We didn't do anything wrong. Why should we forget it?" Qin Feiyang lightly pushed Uncle Yuan away and walked in front of the Lin family's patriarch. He looked straight at the Lin family's patriarch and said, "Lin family's patriarch, today you have to clearly explain what exactly Uncle Yuan and I have obtained from Yi all these years." Chapter 5. Looking at Qin Feiyang's aggressive gaze, the Lin family head frowned slightly. This kid didn't even dare to breathe loudly when he saw him before. Why is he so tough today? After taking a closer look, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Why do I feel that this kid looks a little different today than before? He seems to be a little stronger and tougher than before. The sickly look on his face seems to have disappeared. But he didn't think much about it and said lightly, "You know best what you got. Don't come to E again in the future. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless and breaking your legs." He pulled Lin Yi and left without looking back. Qin Feiyang was about to catch up, but Uncle Yuan stopped him and shook his head. "You don't have to prove it to anyone. As long as you have a clear conscience, it's fine." But Qin Feiyang frowned. "Feiyang, although you have been reborn now, your cultivation has not recovered yet. The top priority is for you to cultivate quickly and strive to return to the 9-star martial artist realm as soon as possible. You have to remember that strength is the absolute truth. If your cultivation is still there, if the Lin family head knew that you are the prince of the great Qin Empire, would he have such an attitude all these years? Although this is still a bit too cruel for you, this is a very realistic problem," Uncle Yuan said. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and nodded. "Uncle Yuan, I understand." But at this moment, the Lin family had turned back. He was alone. Lin Yi wasn't there. "Why are you here again?" Uncle Yuan frowned. "Yi was here just now. There are some things that I can't say." The Lin family had glanced at the two, turned around, and looked at the calm lake with his hands behind his back. He said lightly, "Qin Feiyang, you have been to the pill hall repeatedly. It's nothing more than wanting the marrow cleansing pill. I will find a way to go to the pill hall to get one for you. But as a condition, you and Qin Yuan will leave Iron Ox Town and never appear again." Qin Feiyang frowned suddenly. This person was really going too far. Uncle Yuan stretched out his hand, hinting him not to speak, and said, "Lin family head, don't you feel that doing this is too cruel to the two children?" The head of the Lin clan said, "Indecisiveness will only lead to chaos. Qin Feiyang, I believe you have already seen that Yi has a good impression of Qin Feiyang." Uncle Yuan nodded. "This is absolutely not allowed. Yi is only 14 years old now, and has already become a 9-star martial artist. Her future is bright. But Qin Feiyang is still unable to cultivate. Even if he can cultivate now, he has already passed the golden period of laying the foundation. He won't be able to achieve anything in the future. Let me ask you, how can such a person be worthy of my daughter?" The head of the Lin family said calmly. "Not worthy." Uncle Yuan was slightly stunned. When Feiyang was 10 years old, he was already a 9-star martial master. How can your daughter compare? Feiyang might be in dire straits now, but he still has the blood of the great Qin Empire's royal family. How can your daughter compare to him? However, he didn't say these words out loud, because he wanted to let Qin Feiyang experience the fickleness of human nature. The head of the Lin family continued, "Although you will have to pay a high price to get the marrow cleansing pill from the pill hall, it's still better than my family's property falling into the hands of two outsiders, right?" "Enough!" Qin Feiyang shouted angrily. He couldn't bear it anymore. "I, Qin Feiyang, have not fallen to the point where you need to give alms to me. Prick up your ears and listen to me clearly. I have always treated Yi as my best friend. I don't have any improper thoughts towards her, and I have never asked her for half a copper coin. I don't know how you judge that I have ulterior motives towards your Lin clan, but let me tell you clearly now. I, Qin Feiyang, am not interested in your Lin clan's property. I won't see you off." Qin Feiyang raised his head and puffed out his chest. His words were sharp, and he didn't show any mercy. After he finished speaking, he pointed at the entrance of the lake with a cold expression. The head of the Lin family was surprised. He really didn't expect that this kid would reject his kindness. But he didn't realize that his so-called kindness was trampling on the dignity of Qin Feiyang and Uncle Yuan. Perhaps this was also the purpose of his trip. "Since you have said so, I am too lazy to talk nonsense with you. One last piece of advice. You can hide it from Yi, but you can't hide it from me. If you dare to pester Yi again, I will tell Ma Hongmei that you are not dead." The head of the Lin family flicked his sleeves, left a cold sentence, and turned away. Lin family's head, Ma Hongmei. Just wait and see. Soon, you will know how laughable your current faces are. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists and his eyes were cold. Sigh. Uncle Yuan sighed deeply with a sense of regret. To be honest, he was still very satisfied with Lin Yi. He was even considering to train her well. Unfortunately, she had an arrogant father. Uncle Yuan, the head of the Lin family, is narrow-minded. Maybe he will really tell Ma Hongmei that we are alive. Do you think we should change places? Qin Feiyang said worriedly. Uncle Yuan waved his hand and said, no need. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earthweir. Qin Feiyang was shocked physically and mentally. He didn't expect Uncle Yuan to be so domineering. As if performing a magic trick, Uncle Yuan took out a palm-sized jade box from his bosom and handed it to Qin Feiyang. He smiled and said, there are 20 body tempering pills here. It should be enough for you to become a 5-star martial artist. Body tempering pills. Qin Feiyang took the jade box and opened the lid. Red medicinal pills suddenly entered his sight. There were a total of 20 pills. They were as big as pellets, bright in color, exuding a strong medicinal fragrance. Looking at these 20 body tempering pills, Qin Feiyang was excited. There were 2 ways for a martial artist to temper their body. The first way was to exploit the body. The most common way was to carry a big stone and exercise violently, such as running or mountaineering, so as to achieve the effect of exercising the body and gradually improve the physical quality. The efficiency of this method was very slow, and it would be very painful for the user. The second way was to use medicinal pills. Medicinal pills contained a huge amount of energy that could speed up the tempering of the body. The whole process would not be painful. But compared to the former, the cost of medicinal pills was too high. Ordinary people could not afford it at all. Some people even did not hesitate to put down their self-esteem and become the slaves of certain families in order to get a body-tempering pill. Once, as the prince of the Great Qin Empire, he naturally did not lack body-tempering pills. But it was different now. He had lost everything as early as 5 years ago. He no longer had a strong family background and financial resources. If he didn't have Uncle Yuan's care in the past 5 years, he might not be able to live until today, let alone body-tempering pills. Uncle Yuan gave him 20 body-tempering pills at once. How could he not be excited? Qin Feiyang looked at Uncle Yuan gratefully and said, Uncle Yuan, thank you. Uncle Yuan shook his head and smiled. Uncle Yuan can only help you get started. You still need to walk the road in the future. The meaning of his words was obvious. He only had 20 body-tempering pills. If Qin Feiyang still wanted more, he could only rely on his own ability. I will work hard. Qin Feiyang nodded and turned to the lake. He sat on a smooth round stone and looked at the reflection in the lake. His eyes were filled with determination. If it was in the past, he would not have this confidence. But now, the him from 5 years ago had returned. He had the confidence to rely on his own strength to face all the unknown dangers in the future. Not only that, from now on, it was no longer Uncle Yuan who took care of him. It was him who took care of this old man. The Great Qin Empire. Those people who betrayed me. I'm afraid you wouldn't have thought that not only am I, Qin Feiyang, alive, but I have also stepped on the path of cultivation again. Just you wait, when I return, it will be your end. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly. He took out a body-tempering pill and put it in his mouth. The pill melted in his mouth. A majestic energy, like a torrent, emerged in his limbs and bones, tempering every inch of his flesh and blood, every cell. Before his cultivation was abolished, he was a 9-star martial master. Body tempering was naturally not unfamiliar to him. In less than 2 hours, he broke the first hurdle on the path of cultivation and became a 1-star martial artist. However, this kind of speed also surprised him. And the most important thing was that the energy of the body-tempering pill had not been exhausted. He clearly remembered that when he was 5 years old, when he became a 1-star martial artist, it took a total of 4 hours and consumed 2 body-tempering pills, twice as much as now. Although your cultivation has been abolished, your foundation is still there. Your speed is faster than before and your consumption is less than before. This is a normal phenomenon. Don't worry. Uncle Yuan's voice entered his ears. I see. Qin Feiyang came to a sudden realization. He put aside his doubts and continued to temper his body. One day and one night. His cultivation soared like a rocket. Until noon the next day. Qin Feiyang finally refined the last body tempering pill. Swish. He opened his eyes and 2 beams of light shot out. At this moment he was very excited. He thought that 20 body tempering pills would only allow him to break through to a 5-star martial artist. But he never expected that it would actually allow him to break through to a 6-star martial artist. As long as I have enough body tempering pills, I am confident that I can break through to a 9-star martial artist within 3 days. I might even be able to step into a 1-star martial master. Qin Feiyang was in high spirits. There was an incomparable confidence between his eyebrows. It had been 5 years. The talent that he had lost was finally back. This was the real him. Confidence, wisdom, calmness. As the prince of the great Qin Empire, these qualities were indispensable. Feiyang, how are the results? Uncle Yuan asked. For 1 day and 1 night, he did not leave Qin Feiyang's side. Qin Feiyang glanced at the lakeside. His gaze finally locked onto a dustpan-sized rock that was 30 feet away. He did not answer Uncle Yuan. Instead, he walked straight to the rock. Uncle Yuan was slightly taken aback. He turned around and crossed his arms. He looked at Qin Feiyang curiously. Uncle Yuan, take a good look. Qin Feiyang came to the front of the rock. After calming himself down for a moment, he grinned at Uncle Yuan. Then he punched the rock. Boom. With a loud bang, the rock suddenly broke into pieces and fell into the lake, splashing waves of water. The strength of 6 bears. At the moment when the rock cracked, Uncle Yuan's old eyes shone brightly. It actually exceeded his expectations. The strength of 6 bears was equivalent to a 6-star martial artist. In this Iron Ox town, Qin Feiyang finally had the ability to protect himself. This is the feeling of having power. It's so cool. Qin Feiyang looked at his fist. His heart was also surging. Huff! He took a deep breath and ran to Uncle Yuan. He smiled and said, Uncle Yuan, how is it? I didn't disappoint you, did I? Aren't you asking the obvious? Uncle Yuan rolled his eyes. He reached out and patted Qin Feiyang's head. He smiled and said, Wait here. Uncle Yuan will go and hunt a beast for you. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said, No, no, no. Uncle Yuan, I will go for such a small matter. You haven't closed your eyes for 1 day and 1 night. Just take a good rest here. He completely didn't give Uncle Yuan the chance to speak. Finished speaking, he turned around and dashed towards the exit. Lord, I didn't let you down. After 5 years of training, Feiyang is no longer that ignorant young man. He has grown up. His calm personality is far beyond his peers. He now has the ability to take charge. You must persevere until the moment we return to the imperial capital. After Qin Feiyang disappeared, Uncle Yuan muttered to himself. His eyes gradually moistened. Chapter 6. The lake was surrounded by mountains and wild beasts could be seen everywhere. As long as one had enough strength, they could hunt as many as they wanted. But there were very few that tasted good. Qin Feiyang searched for half an hour before he found a pig. The meat of the pig was good. Whether it was roasted, stewed, or eaten, the taste was very delicious. Moreover, the pig's attack power was not strong. With Qin Feiyang's strength he could easily deal with it. He hid behind a bush, his eyes locked onto the pig, and slowly approached it without making a sound. This pig was 2 meters long, with dark hair all over its body, like steel needles. When he was about to approach, Qin Feiyang kicked his leg, and jumped out from behind the bush like lightning. He suddenly punched the pig's head. Accompanied by a wail, the pig fell to the ground and died. If it was before, I would have to take a detour when I met this guy. The feeling of having power is so cool. Qin Feiyang licked his lips and strode forward. He grabbed the pig's front and back feet with both hands and lifted it up. He smiled and said, Good guy, it's 400 to 500 pounds. It's enough for me and Uncle Yuan to eat for a while. He carried the pig and ran towards the lake. His steps were as fast as flying. Ayo! All of a sudden, a loud wolf's howl exploded somewhere behind him. startling the wild beasts in the jungle and causing them to flee in all directions. However, Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. He suddenly braked and stopped. He turned around and looked in the direction of the beast's howl. This beast's howl was full of energy, shaking the mountains and rivers. There was also a trace of ferocity, enough to show that it was a beast. Beasts were different from wild beasts. Wild beasts could only rely on their instincts to fight back, just like ordinary people. But beasts, like martial artists, had already mastered the cultivation method. In the past, Qin Feiyang had seen many beasts in the Great Qin Empire. Not only did they have intelligence no less than humans, but they also had the ability to overturn rivers and seas and destroy mountains and rivers. The most important thing was that beasts were more valuable than wild beasts. For Qin Feiyang's current situation, nothing was more important than money. Only when he earned enough money could he buy more body-quenching pills. Let's go take a look and see what level of beast it is. Qin Feiyang carried the pig and rushed towards the place where the sound came from. Ferocious beasts were also divided into different grades. Beginner dire beast, intermediate dire beast, advanced dire beast. Of course, ferocious beasts of the same level also had differences in strength. The strength of a beginner beast was equivalent to a 1-star to 3-star martial artist. The strength of a mid-level beast was equivalent to a 4-star to 6-star martial artist. The strength of a high-level ferocious beast was equivalent to a 7-star to 9-star martial artist. Qin Feiyang silently prayed that it wasn't a high-level vicious beast. Otherwise, even if it was standing in front of him, he could only stare helplessly. After running for several hundred meters, he stood on top of a small hill and looked ahead. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't seen it, but he was shocked when he saw it. 50 meters away, a white wolf was lying on top of a withered leaf, but it was covered in bruises. He was lying there alone, licking his wounds. The wolf was a very cunning and ferocious beast. It could not be ruled out that it deliberately pretended to be injured in order to lure its prey into the trap. Furthermore, the wolf was a pack of ferocious beasts. Therefore, when he saw that it was a wolf, Qin Feiyang quickly retreated down the small hill and gently placed the pig on the ground. Then he climbed up the small hill and hid in the bushes, quietly observing. Slowly, he felt that the wolf was not faking it, because every wound on its body was lacerated. In some places he could even see the white bones. After confirming it again and again, Qin Feiyang was ready to take action. This wolf was a mid-level vicious beast. It could be sold for at least 10 gold coins. The market price of a body-tempering pill was 50 silver coins. 1 gold coin was equivalent to 100 silver coins. In other words, this wolf could be exchanged for at least 20 body-tempering pills. It was really an unexpected gain. It's there. But at this moment, a shout of surprise came from not far away. Why does this voice sound so familiar? Qin Feiyang hurriedly lay in the grass and frowned slightly. At the same time, after hearing the shout, the white wolf stood up again and walked toward Qin Feiyang. But after a few steps, it fell to the ground again and struggled hard, probably because of its serious injury. However, it could no longer stand up, and a trace of despair quickly crept up in its eyes. 2 teenagers, 14 or 15 years old, ran toward the white wolf from afar. It turned out to be them. Qin Feiyang whispered with a cold gaze. The 2 teenagers, one was called Lin Shi, and the other was called Lin Feng. The former was a burly man. He was far taller than his peers. He was about 1.85 meters tall. His muscles bulged, full of explosive power. The latter was relatively thin, about 1.7 meters tall. He wore a gray robe. His long and narrow eyes were like a pair of snake's eyes. There was a trace of cold light, which made people feel disgusted at first glance. Both of them were children of the Lin family. Because he was close to Lin Yi, the children of the Lin family did not like him, especially these 2. In the past 5 years, they had humiliated him. Damn beast, why don't you continue to run? As soon as the 2 approached, they blocked the white wolf from the front and back, sneering again and again. It seems that they seriously injured the white wolf. Qin Feiyang murmured. Both of them were 6-star martial artists. It was not difficult to deal with a mid-level beast together. But it could also be seen that the white wolf's strength was not ordinary, because Lin Shi and Lin Feng were also scarred, and they looked quite embarrassed. Facing the siege of the two, the despair in the white wolf's eyes was even stronger. Lin Feng looked down at it and sneered. You actually dared to hurt us. After we kill you, we will go to the Wolf Valley and slaughter all of your descendants. 50 low-level vicious beasts can be sold for a lot of gold coins. What? It's actually the Wolf King of the Wolf Valley. Qin Feiyang was surprised. He had long heard of the name of the Wolf Valley. It was the most dangerous place in this area. A group of vicious wolves had been entrenched there for a long time. Ordinary hunters would die if they entered. In the past 5 years he had never set foot there. Even when he was outside the Wolf Valley, he would take a detour. But he did not expect that he would encounter the Wolf King of the Wolf Valley today. The Wolf King was worth 10 gold coins. The white wolf, a low-level beast, was worth 3 gold coins. Lin Feng said that there were more than 50 of them in the Wolf Valley. In other words, if he could hunt all of them, he could sell them for more than 100 gold coins, which could be exchanged for 200 to 300 body-tempering pills. This was a huge fortune. Just thinking about it, Qin Feiyang felt his blood boiling. At this moment, Lin Feng and Lin Shi finally made their move. To deal with a seriously injured mid-level beast, even if it was the Wolf King, it was easy for them. However, there was a sudden change. The dying Wolf King suddenly leaped up with all its might. It opened its bloody mouth and bared its fangs as it bit towards Lin Shi's head. Damn it! Lin Shi was furious. At the critical moment, he tilted his head slightly and avoided the Wolf King's attack. The Wolf King bit his right shoulder. Crack! The bone was crushed on the spot. Moreover, the entire arm was torn off by the Wolf King. Fresh blood spurted out like a fountain. Ah! Lin Shi screamed, covering the bleeding wound, and shouted bitterly, Lin Feng, kill it! The Wolf King's sudden attack also startled Lin Feng. He even instinctively took a step back. But after hearing Lin Shi's roar, he flew into a rage and punched the Wolf King's back. Ayo! The Wolf King howled, and its whole body was like a meteorite, smashing down a large patch of shrubs. With a bang, it smashed into a patch of soil. Witnessing all this, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. The cunning and ferociousness of a wolf were indeed worthy of their reputation. It was obviously dying, but it still tore off one of Lin Shi's arms. If it weren't for Lin Shi and Lin Feng, he was afraid that he would have been attacked by the Wolf King. Thinking about it, he was scared. But now, the Wolf King was really unable to move. Half of its body was submerged in the soil, and it stared at Lin Shi and Lin Feng. There was a trace of pleasure in its desperate eyes. This was the nature of a wolf. Even if it died, it would make the enemy pay the price. It's time for me to make a move, and kill Lin Shi and Lin Feng as well. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light, stood up from the grass without concealing it, and strode towards the 2 people and 1 beast. Lin Shi was bandaging his wound when he suddenly saw Qin Feiyang appear. His eyes immediately surged with killing intent, and he shouted, "Why are you here?" Lin Feng, who was walking towards the Wolf King, turned his head in confusion and sneered. "I was wondering who it was, so it's you, a useless trash." It seemed that he was disdainful. After saying that, he turned back and strode towards the Wolf King, his eyes flashing with a fierce light. Qin Feiyang didn't say a word, and the speed of his feet was getting faster and faster. Lin Shi felt something was wrong and shouted, "Qin Feiyang, what do you want to do?" "Kill you." Qin Feiyang smiled sinisterly. He turned from walking to running and dashed towards Lin Shi. "Kill me?" Lin Shi was slightly stunned and said contemptuously, "Although I have lost an arm, it's not your turn to behave atrociously. Lin Feng, continue to deal with the Wolf King. As for this trash, I will smash him with a punch." "Understood." Lin Feng nodded. He had no intention to help. Although Lin Shi was seriously injured, he was still a 6-star martial artist. Wouldn't it be easy to kill a trash who couldn't cultivate? Then let's try. Qin Feiyang licked his lips, and a bloodthirsty light emerged in his eyes. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and the power in his body surged. When he approached, he didn't hold back and punched Lin Shi with all his strength. Lin Shi's eyes were full of disdain, but he didn't show any mercy and punched out. He also had the same idea as Qin Feiyang. Since he met him here, he would completely obliterate him. Bang! The moment the two fists collided, a painful shriek was heard. What? Lin Feng's body shook. This was actually Lin Shi's scream? He turned around abruptly and saw a scene that he would never forget. The trash in his eyes, Qin Feiyang, was actually standing steadily on the ground. Lin Shi, who he thought would definitely win, was lying on the ground at this moment, with blood foaming from his mouth. And the other arm was actually fractured. Sharp bone spurs pierced through the skin and exposed outside, and blood was gushing out. Chapter 7. Wasn't Qin Feiyang unable to cultivate? Wasn't he a good-for-nothing? But how could he explain what was happening now? Could it be that Qin Feiyang had been pretending to be weak all along? This sudden change had completely overturned Lin Feng's previous understanding. Similarly, Lin Shi was the same. His face and eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, in their eyes, Qin Feiyang was no longer small and insignificant. He was like a god of war who had returned. His body was not considered strong, but it was incomparably majestic. Qin Feiyang's gaze was like lightning as he turned to look at Lin Feng. Lin Shi was shocked and shouted, "Lin Feng, why aren't you running away? You must tell the family head about Qin Feiyang's situation." He suddenly got up and pounced on Qin Feiyang's back. His legs tightly clamped Qin Feiyang's feet, and at the same time, he bit Qin Feiyang's shoulder and refused to let go. He did not want Qin Feiyang to chase after Lin Feng. Lin Feng did not run away. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was restrained by Lin Shi, he smiled coldly. With a clang, he pulled out a dagger from his waist. The dagger was very sharp and could cut through hair. "Bastard, go to hell!" He roared and rushed towards Qin Feiyang with the dagger in his hand. He was full of murderous intent. Qin Feiyang was as calm as a mountain, expressionless. Even though Lin Shi was biting Qin Feiyang's shoulder so hard that Qin Feiyang's flesh had already broken and his teeth were biting the bones of his shoulder, causing blood to flow, Qin Feiyang didn't even frown. But the strange thing was, facing the fierce Lin Feng, he did not counterattack. He just stared at Lin Feng without blinking. The extremely weak Leng Wang was puzzled. Was this human waiting for death? But suddenly, its pupils suddenly shrank. When Lin Feng arrived in front of Qin Feiyang, without saying anything, he raised his dagger and ruthlessly stabbed it towards Qin Feiyang's chest. The blade of the dagger flickered with cold light. But in the blink of an eye, Qin Feiyang suddenly turned around, and the dagger sank into Lin Shi's back. "Ah!" Lin Shi screamed on the spot. He slid down from Qin Feiyang's back and fell to the ground. Lin Feng was also dumbfounded. However, Qin Feiyang seized the opportunity and fiercely punched towards Lin Feng's chest. Crack! His sternum was broken. His internal organs were shattered. His entire chest caved in. "Ah!" With a miserable cry, Lin Feng crashed into a tree trunk as thick as a basin like a meteor. His spine broke on the spot. With a thud, he rolled to the ground. After that, he couldn't get up anymore. He laid weakly on the ground, howling miserably. Furthermore, whether it was Lin Shi or Lin Feng, their life energy fluctuations were rapidly dissipating. Qin Feiyang glanced at the two of them, the corner of his mouth raised slightly, and said, "For the past 5 years, you have been arrogant in front of me all day long. I thought you were strong, but it turns out that you are only SOSO. Lin Shi looked at Qin Feiyang with resentment, spitting out blood from his mouth, and said intermittently, "Qin Feiyang, the patriarch will not let you go. Ma Hongmei will not let you go. Your death is not far away. Ma Hongmei, I will personally chop off her head. As for the patriarch of the Lin family, when I'm in a good mood, I might let him live for ease sake." Qin Feiyang bent down, grabbed the dagger on Lin Shi's back, and pulled it out forcefully. Blood immediately spurted out from the wound like a column of blood. "Qin Feiyang, you will die a horrible death." The heart-wrenching pain caused Lin Shi's face to twist. He opened his mouth to curse, but before he could finish, he fell to the ground and breathed his last. Before he died, he hated Lin Feng to the core. How could there be such a stupid person in this world? He had already fought for a chance to escape, but he insisted on coming to die. If Lin Feng had listened to him and immediately turned around to escape, they would not have been completely wiped out now. As long as Lin Feng escaped back to Iron Ox Town, Qin Feiyang would not be far from doomsday. He was not afraid of a godlike opponent, but a pig-like teammate. Lin Shi died with his eyes wide open. Qin Feiyang looked at Lin Shi indifferently, then turned around and walked toward Lin Feng. Qin Feiyang, please don't kill me. I'll be your slave. Ah, Lin Feng begged repeatedly. However, Qin Feiyang was not moved at all. He grabbed the dagger and directly stabbed it into Lin Feng's heart, causing blood to splatter on the spot. Be a cow or horse. You are not qualified. Qin Feiyang whispered, pulled out the dagger, and began to search the two of them. He found 10 body tempering pills and 5 gold coins. Making a fortune from the dead is not a bad choice. Qin Feiyang was very satisfied with this harvest. 10 body tempering pills were enough for him to break through to a 7-star martial artist. 5 gold coins could also buy 10 body tempering pills. In addition to the Wolf King and the 50 over white wolves in the Wolf Valley, he suddenly felt that it was not difficult to return to a 9-star martial artist. However, this was far from enough, because in the capital of the Great Qin Empire, even a martial grandmaster was only a third-rate character, let alone a martial master. I still want to become stronger. Qin Feiyang muttered, turned around, and walked toward the Wolf King. He had to be extra careful when dealing with this cunning and vicious guy. Seeing Qin Feiyang walking toward him, the Wolf King's despair intensified. This human was not flustered in the face of danger, his mind was clear, and his methods were ruthless. Although his strength was similar to the two humans on the ground, in terms of danger, he was much more terrifying than the two humans. Qin Feiyang approached step by step, and the Wolf King's heart fell into a dark abyss. It was afraid. It was flustered. It did not want to die. Under the desire to survive, it stood up tenaciously and glared fiercely at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was vigilant and stopped 5 meters away from the Wolf King. But when he noticed the Wolf King's eyes, the vigilance in his eyes dissipated and was replaced by surprise. He muttered, "This guy's character is somewhat similar to mine. No matter what kind of situation he is in, he will not give up the thought of survival." He could not help but feel compassion. Qin Feiyang was silent for a moment and smiled. "White-eyed wolf, I won't kill you, you can go." The Wolf King was slightly stunned, and there was doubt in his eyes. "I really won't kill you. Why don't we be friends?" Qin Feiyang said jokingly. He did not dare to be friends with a wolf, because Uncle Yuan often warned him that being friends with a wolf was like asking a tiger for its skin. It was purely digging his own grave. The name White-Eyed Wolf was not groundless. Woo-woo, however. Without waiting for him to finish his words, the Wolf King suddenly growled, and there was a shocking murderous light in his eyes. Oh no! Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. But before he could react, the Wolf King suddenly jumped up to a height of 3 meters in the air, spitting blood and opening his mouth, revealing his dense fangs. It is said that creatures like wolves are all white-eyed wolves. This sentence is indeed correct. Qin Feiyang flew into a rage, grasping the dagger in his hand and preparing to counterattack. But a pungent stench suddenly enveloped them. Qin Feiyang was shocked. This was not the smell of a wolf. This was the smell of a snake. He suddenly raised his head. Immediately, he saw a venomous snake swooping down at him. This snake was as thick as an arm and as long as a shoulder pole. Its entire body was dark green and mixed with the leaves. If one did not look carefully, one would not notice it at all. On its head, there was a sarcoma like a crane crown. Crane crown snake. Seeing that sarcoma, Qin Feiyang could not help but exclaim, and his scalp exploded. The crane crown snake was the same as the Wolf King. It was also a ferocious beast. But compared to the Wolf King, it was even more terrifying, because it had a fatal poison in its body. Once this poison was injected into the human body, even if it was a martial artist of the same realm, they would die within 30 breaths at most. Qin Feiyang did not expect this at all. There was actually such a terrifying poisonous creature hiding on this tree. It was only when he saw the crane crown snake that he understood that the Wolf King's growl earlier was to remind him. Unfortunately, not only did he not understand, he even mistakenly thought that the Wolf King wanted to repay kindness with enmity. In reality, it was saving him. In the blink of an eye, the crane-crowned snake swooped down, and at the same time, the Wolf King leaped up. It bit the crane-crowned snake's head, and then both of them rolled behind Qin Feiyang. The Wolf King was full of ferocity. It did not know where it borrowed the strength from, but it bit the crane-crowned snake tightly. The crane-crowned snake was not easy to deal with either. It tightly coiled around the Wolf King's neck, wanting to strangle it to death. The two ferocious beasts fought together, but the Wolf King was obviously at a disadvantage. Qin Feiyang looked at the two beasts, his eyes flickering. Suddenly, he dived and pounced, stabbing the dagger in his hand towards the crane-crowned snake's vital point with all his strength. Splat! The tip of the dagger sank into the crane-crowned snake's vital point, and blood spurted out. The crane-crowned snake was in so much pain that it kept hissing. Immediately after, Qin Feiyang grabbed the Wolf King's tail, forcibly dragging the Wolf King and retreating. To hit a snake, hit its vital point. No matter if it was a normal snake or a ferocious beast, its vital point was its vital point. As long as its vital point was broken, it would die without a doubt. The crane-crowned snake struggled for a moment in the underbrush, then gradually calmed down. Its long and narrow snake eyes also gradually enlarged and finally turned gray. Phew! Qin Feiyang breathed a sigh of relief. He suddenly quivered, letting go of the Wolf King's tail, and quickly retreated 5 meters. He then looked at the Wolf King. The vigilance in his eyes did not disappear. Although the Wolf King had just saved him, he did not dare to be careless against a creature like a wolf. However, he discovered that the Wolf King was lying on the ground motionlessly, with white foam coming out of its mouth. Oh no, it must have bitten open the crane-crowned snake's head, and the venom flowed into its body. If I don't save it, it will definitely die. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered, and he ran to the crane-crowned snake's side in large strides, swiftly cutting off the crown on its head. Although the crane-crowned snake's venom was strong, it also carried the antidote, and that was the crown on its head. But just as he was cutting off the crown, whoosh! 3 ice-cold arrows, like 3 poisonous snakes bearing their fangs, suddenly appeared and violently shot towards Qin Feiyang. At the same time, on the other side, 3 arrows were also shot towards the Wolf King. Damn it! Why are there still people? Hearing the sharp sound of the arrows piercing through the air, Qin Feiyang did not need to look to know what was going on, and his face immediately darkened. He had no choice. He turned around and rushed to the Wolf King's side, throwing the crown in front of the Wolf King's mouth. The Wolf King coldly looked at Qin Feiyang, stretched out its tongue, and sucked the crown into its mouth. Immediate effect. Chapter 8. At this moment, even if Qin Feiyang wanted to dodge, it was too late. There was a trace of madness in his eyes. Holding a dagger, he faced the 3 arrows in front of him. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. 2 arrows were deflected and flew past his ears, leaving 2 glaring bloody scars on his face. However, one of the arrows pierced into his right shoulder with a poof. At the same time, he lifted his left leg. The 3 arrows that were aimed at Wolf King pierced through his calf, and were stuck between his leg bones. Blood was gushing out. Qin Feiyang's face was distorted by the excruciating pain. He gritted his teeth and pulled out the arrow from his right shoulder. He propped himself up on the ground and scanned the area in front of him. White-eyed wolf, I know that you are very weak now. However, we can only rely on you to escape. I saved you. Don't leave me behind. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice. Before he finished his words, a man in black walked out from a bush 100 meters away. A young woman also walked out from behind a bush behind him. Both of them looked to be around 18 or 19 years old. They were good-looking. The woman was beautiful and the man was handsome. Their clothes were made of silk. One look and one could tell that they were from a big family. Lingu Lingua. Qin Feiyang looked around and his pupils constricted. He was no stranger to these 2 people. They were from the younger generation of the Lin family. However, both of them were 7-star martial artists. Even if he was in his peak condition, he might not be their match, let alone now that he was injured. Both of them held a black iron bow in their hands. Lin Guo's iron bow was slightly smaller. She carried more than a dozen sharp arrows on her back. Lin Guo's face was as cold as frost. She pulled out 3 sharp arrows, knocked them on the bow, and aimed them at Qin Feiyang. She shouted with a stern voice, "You really have big guts. You actually dared to kill Lin Feng and Lin Shi. Now you only have one chance. Surrender yourself and come back with us to await the patriarch's punishment." Lin Gu also pulled out 3 arrows from his back and aimed them at Qin Feiyang. He was ready to shoot. "What if I say no?" Qin Feiyang gloomily looked at the two of them. He didn't expect to be seen by these 2 people. He was really fucking unlucky. Lin Gu sneered. "If you dare to say a single word of no, I guarantee that a bloody hole will appear in your body in the next moment." Qin Feiyang growled in a low voice, "White-eyed wolf, how long do you want to rest?" Wolf King was lying on the ground. His breathing was weak, and he looked like he was on his last breath. However, Qin Feiyang knew that this guy was definitely faking it. Lin Gu said, "You're actually in the company of wolves. No wonder you're able to do such a thing." Hearing this, Wolf King's eyes flashed with an ominous glint. Qin Feiyang sneered, "So what if I'm in the company of wolves?" Although wolves are cunning, in the eyes of Qin Feiyang, they are 10,000 times better than hypocrites like you. "Then I can only kill you to rid Iron Bull Town of evil." Lin Gu pulled the bow forcefully. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. "If it weren't for Lin Yi, you would have killed me long ago. If you want me to die, just say it. Don't find these high-sounding reasons, okay?" Qin Feiyang sneered. In the Lin family, except for Lin Yi, he didn't have a good impression of anyone. "You're really stubborn. Go to hell." Lin Guo's eyes flashed with a cold light. She loosened her grip. 3 arrows pierced through the sky like lightning and went straight to Qin Feiyang. Oh! It was also at this moment. Wolf King howled at Qin Feiyang and stood up abruptly. Qin Feiyang didn't say a word. He sat directly on Wolf King's back and grabbed the fur on Wolf King's neck tightly. Whoosh! Immediately, Wolf King ran at full speed, plunged into a bush, and ran into the depths of the dense forest. "Die!" Lin Gu yelled and pulled the iron bow to the extreme. 3 arrows pierced through the air and shot toward Qin Feiyang and Wolf King. "Be careful," Qin Feiyang reminded. Wolf King dodged to the left, and the 3 arrows missed. With a click, they sank into a tree trunk as thick as a bucket. What a strong lethality! They are not holding back. Qin Feiyang broke out in a cold sweat. If this arrow hit him, wouldn't he die on the spot? "Chase!" Lin Guo waved her hand. The 2 launched at full speed. While chasing, they looked for an opportunity. As long as there was a good opportunity, they would not hesitate to shoot. Wolf King carried Qin Feiyang and ran around. In just a few seconds, it was already tired and panting. Qin Feiyang yelled, "White-eyed wolf, can you go faster?" Lin Guo and Lin Gu were 7-star martial artists. They were faster than them. If this continued, they would catch up with them soon. Upon hearing the yelling, Wolf King's eyes that were as big as copper bells suddenly showed a trace of anger. If it could speak, it would definitely fly into a rage on the spot and scold Qin Feiyang. "You are comfortable on the top and don't have to do anything. But what about me? I have to carry a heavyweight like you. It is already very difficult for me to maintain this speed. How can I speed up?" Of course. It couldn't say these words out loud. In fact, Qin Feiyang weighed at most 110 kilograms. It was not considered a heavyweight. However, to Wolf King, who was covered in injuries and exhausted, it was no different from carrying a cow. "Today you have nowhere to go. Qin Feiyang, stop struggling if you know what's good for you." Lin Guo and Lin Gu were murderous. As long as Qin Feiyang and Wolf King stopped, they would shoot them mercilessly. Qin Feiyang said coldly, Lin Gu, wait and see. You will end up in a worse state than Lin Feng and Lin Gu. You are still so stubborn when you are about to die." Although Spirit Guo was a woman, she was full of hostility. She pulled the bow and released the arrow in an instant. Swoosh! Crack! The arrow shuttled through the void at an extremely fast speed, crushing shrubs and weeds one after another. Qin Feiyang only felt that the sharpness was bone-piercing. What is going on? However, at this moment he could not care less about the arrow behind him. He looked ahead in shock and anger. It was actually a cliff. The most important thing was that Wolf King did not stop at all in the face of the cliff in front of him. White-eyed Wolf, stop. I don't want to die yet. Don't, Qin Feiyang anxiously roared, but the Wolf King turned a deaf ear to him. Without any hesitation, it directly jumped off the cliff. White-eyed Wolf, I hate you. Qin Feiyang's roar echoed from the bottom of the cliff and reverberated in the world for a long time. Lin Gua and Lin Gu stopped at the edge of the cliff and looked down with furrowed brows. What should we do? Lin Gu asked. We can't see the bottom. They will definitely die if they jump down like that. Lin Gua's lips curled and her gaze was incomparably cold. Lin Gu nodded and sneered. How dare they kill a disciple of the Lin family? Even if Qin Feiyang is dead, Qin Yuan will not let them off easily. Let's go and report to the family head. The two of them turned and entered the forest, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. It's really hopeless now. I haven't returned to the Great Qin Empire yet. White-eyed Wolf, I know you're ruthless enough, but you don't have to do this. Now Qin Feiyang could no longer care about the arrow wound on his right shoulder. He hugged Wolf King tightly and looked at the ground below with worry in his eyes. Was there a way out after falling down? Suddenly, there was a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. On the ground below, he actually saw a river. Could it be? Qin Feiyang was overjoyed. The Wolf Valley was nearby and Wolf King was naturally very familiar with this area. It must have known that there was a river below, and thus jumped down without hesitation. I was scared to death. Qin Feiyang finally heaved a sigh of relief. He fell to the ground and without any suspense, turned into a pile of minced meat on the spot. Falling into the river, with his current 6-star physique, there was definitely a risk, but at least there was a chance of survival. The only thing he had to pray for now was that it was not a river that was only a few meters deep, or the bottom of the river was filled with reefs. If that was the case, he would still die. Dong. After a few breaths, a man and a beast were like two huge rocks. Both of them fell into the river, splashing up huge waves that were several meters high. One could imagine how terrifying the inertia caused by falling from a high altitude was. The moment he came into contact with the water, Qin Feiyang felt as if his body was being torn apart. A heart-wrenching pain instantly drowned him like a tide. I can't faint now. Qin Feiyang forcefully bit his tongue and became much more clear-headed. He knew nothing about this river. If there were powerful aquatic beasts lurking in the river, and he fainted, wouldn't he become a delicious meal in the eyes of the aquatic beasts? Even if there were no aquatic beasts, he would drown sooner or later if he sank like this. He endured the intense pain and moved his hands and feet. His hands were fine, but his left leg did not stop moving. He widened his eyes to look and found that his left leg was fractured. The broken part was lacerated and blood dyed a large part of the river red. Fortunately, it's just a broken leg. Qin Feiyang breathed a sigh of relief. He gritted his teeth and swam towards the bottom of the river, because the Wolf King had already fainted and was gradually sinking down. This river was very deep. At least until now, Qin Feiyang still had not seen the bottom of the river. Of course, the river water was also very clear. After he chased down, he grabbed Wolf King's tail and turned around, quickly swimming upwards. After living by the lake for 5 years, his swimming skills were naturally quite good. Even though he had a broken leg, his speed was not slower than an ordinary person. It was just that in the process of swimming, he had to endure an inhuman pain. After a dozen breaths, he finally surfaced and greedily breathed in the air. But his face immediately turned green. What he breathed in was not only air, but also a pungent fishy smell. An aquatic beast. His body trembled. A thought that almost made him despair crawled up in his mind. If he encountered an aquatic beast now, then only death awaited him and Wolf King. He carefully looked around, and his gaze suddenly locked onto the left. On the surface of the water, there was a huge body floating. Qin Feiyang's first impression was that he had encountered a huge monster. He looked up along the torso. When he saw the true appearance of the huge monster, his body suddenly froze and his face turned pale. That was not just a huge monster. He simply did not know how to describe it. It was a fish. But it was not an ordinary fish. It had already evolved into an aquatic beast. Only half of its body was exposed on the surface of the water, but it was as big as a house. It was hard to imagine how big its entire body was. Those dustpan-sized eyes flashed with a terrifying ominous glint, making Qin Feiyang's scalp almost explode. Chapter 9. The big fish stared at Qin Feiyang and Wolf King, motionless. Qin Feiyang also did not dare to move. He was afraid of startling the big fish. One man and one fish stared at each other like this. The atmosphere was particularly solemn. About 100 breaths passed. Seeing that the big fish still did not move, Qin Feiyang carried Wolf King and slowly swam towards the shore. However, as soon as he moved, the big fish also moved. Splash! As soon as the big fish opened its mouth, the river water flowed backwards and crazily rushed into its mouth. Why am I so unlucky today? Qin Feiyang roared, and disappeared into the big fish's wide mouth together with Wolf King. Dong! The big fish raised a wave of water, and plunged into the bottom of the river, disappearing. The river water was like a waterfall, rushing Qin Feiyang and Wolf King into the big fish's stomach. Qin Feiyang was extremely anxious. If they really entered the big fish's stomach, not even their bones would be left. Moreover, the inside of this fish was very smelly, very fishy, and simply disgusting. He held his breath, turned his big hand into an eagle's claw, and pressed down hard. Puff! 5 fingers like steel needles pierced into the flesh. Qin Feiyang firmly clasped that piece of flesh and fixed his body. The other hand tightly grasped Wolf King's tail, preventing Wolf King from being washed away by the current. At the same time, at the bottom of the river, the big fish that was looking for prey also scurried around in pain. Qin Feiyang, who was in its stomach, was naturally spinning and his body swayed violently. If only that dagger was still here. Qin Feiyang was furious. When he fell into the river, the dagger fell out of his hand and sank to the bottom of the river. At that time he did not care about it. Who would have thought that just as he surfaced, he would encounter another big fish? Today was really a double whammy. After not going back for so long, he did not know if Uncle Yuan had gone to find him. Oh! A wolf howl interrupted his thoughts. White-eyed wolf, you're finally awake. We're in a fish's stomach. Quick, think of a way to get out. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed as if he had seen his family. In the past, he had never thought that there would be a day where he would share life and death with a wolf. As the saying goes, the world is unpredictable. Wolf King scanned his surroundings, and his pupils constricted. Suddenly, its eyes flashed with a terrifying light. He opened his mouth wide and bared his fangs. He actually bit down and tore off a large piece of fish meat, chewing it with relish. You still have the mood to eat? Qin Feiyang's face darkened, blue veins popping out. Wasn't this guy a little too unreliable? Wolf King didn't pay any attention to him, and continued to bite him. The intense pain was like a tidal wave, hitting every nerve in the big fish's body. It made even more noise. From time to time, he would jump out of the water. From time to time, he would dive to the bottom of the river. Sometimes he would crash into the river bank. Not long after, its body was riddled with wounds and blood was flowing out. He didn't know how much time had passed. Anyway, Qin Feiyang felt that a few centuries had passed. The big fish finally stopped and floated weakly on the surface of the water. Blood dyed the river red. What's going on? Qin Feiyang was bewildered. Not only did the big fish stop swaying, but the water flowing down from the esophagus also became much smaller. Could it be that the big fish was sleeping? Awoo! Wolf King howled at Qin Feiyang, signaling Qin Feiyang to climb up the esophagus. Qin Feiyang was puzzled. He let go of Wolf King's tail and struggled to climb up. Wolf King followed beside him. Not long after, the two of them climbed out of the esophagus and entered the big fish's wide mouth. The big fish's mouth was slightly open. They could clearly see the sunlight outside and the blood-red river water. Qin Feiyang was pleasantly surprised. He hurriedly limped over, bent down, and climbed out, falling into the river. The pungent smell of blood came head-on. But he couldn't care less. He quickly swam towards the shore. The Wolf King's speed was not any slower than his. It climbed ashore in front of him and lay on top of a rock, gasping for air. After Qin Feiyang climbed ashore, he also sat down beside Wolf King. He looked at the big fish in the middle of the river with lingering fear. Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock and bewilderment. Why was the big fish bleeding? Its enormous body was similarly riddled with scars, without a single piece of skin intact. Oh! Wolf King howled with a trace of pride in his eyes. Qin Feiyang thought carefully, and suddenly came to a realization. It turned out that Wolf King had been biting the fish not just to eat. Its biggest purpose was to make the big fish feel pain. Once the pain reached the point where it couldn't bear it, the big fish would go crazy and charge around in the river. As a result, it was left with injuries all over its body. Qin Feiyang gave a thumbs up and said with a smile, "White-eyed wolf, I didn't expect you to be so smart. How about it, let's be friends?" Wolf King's eyes revealed a trace of disdain. He got up from the rock, turned around and left without looking back. Qin Feiyang laughed involuntarily and waved his hand. "White-eyed wolf, see you later." Hiss. As soon as he finished, he grimaced and sucked in a breath of cold air. Before he had been in a tense state, so he didn't feel any pain. But now that he relaxed, a strong pain came from his right shoulder and left leg. It was so painful that he broke out in a cold sweat. Right shoulder. There was a finger-sized bloody hole, penetrating from front to back and bleeding. Left leg. 3 arrows were still stuck between his leg bones. And when he fell into the river, his thigh was unfortunately fractured, and his flesh was lacerated. Lingu knew an old grudges. We will slowly settle them in the future. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. He gritted his teeth and pulled out the 3 arrows with force. Severe pain. It made his face twist and he almost fainted. Poochie. He tore off the tattered clothes on his body. The 10 body-tempering pills and 10 gold coins in his arms fell to the ground one after another. He simply bandaged his wound, picked up the body-tempering pills and gold coins and whispered, "Fortunately, I didn't fall into the river, or else this time's work would have been in vain." Every kind of pill had been specially processed. As long as it wasn't soaked in water for a long time, it wouldn't melt. There are countless wild beasts in the forest. In my current state, if I meet an adult wild beast, I will be at a disadvantage. I have to find a hidden place and heal my injuries first. Qin Feiyang glanced around and tore a piece of cloth from his pants. After wrapping the body-tempering pills and gold coins, he grabbed the 3 arrows beside him and used them as crutches. He got up and limped towards the dense forest. Ironox Town Lin family. Discussion hall. He actually dared to kill a member of the Lin family. This Qin Feiyang really ate the guts of a leopard. The head of the Lin family was furious and his killing intent was awe-inspiring. Lingu and Lingua stood aside respectfully. There were still 2 dead bodies lying on the ground. They were Lin Feng and Lin Shi. "Father, there must be some misunderstanding." Lin Yi ran into the hall anxiously. "Bastard. Even now, you're still speaking for Qin Feiyang. Housekeeper, drag her away and guard her strictly. Without my permission, no one is allowed to let her leave." The head of the Lin family was furious. The butler standing at the door immediately stepped forward to persuade Lin Yi. There were also 2 family servants blocking in front of Lin Yi. "Father," Lin Yi hurriedly called. The head of the Lin family yelled, "Hurry up and take her away." "Yes." The butler responded and looked at Lin Yi. "Miss, I dare not disobey the order of the head of the family. Please forgive me." He waved his hand. The 2 family servants immediately went up and carried Lin Yi. Under the guidance of the butler, they quickly left the hall. "Untamed white-eyed wolf." The head of the Lin family scolded angrily, looked at Lingua and Lingua, and said in a deep voice, "Where is Qin Feiyang?" Lingua said, "He has fallen off the cliff. This little bastard is really lucky, but Qin Yuan can't be let go." The head of the Lin family showed a cold gaze. Lingua said, "To tell the truth, Lingu and I also have this idea." Lingu followed, "Family master, as long as you say the word, I will kill that old thing now." The head of the Lin family waved his hand and said, "No, we don't need to do this kind of trivial matter. Someone will do it for us." Oh. The 2 were surprised. "Mahongmei," the head of the Lin family sneered and said, You go to Ma Hongmei now and tell her that Qin Feiyang and Qin Yuan are not dead yet." The two looked at each other and smiled. They cupped their hands and said, "The head of the family is wise." The head of the Lin family said, "In addition, pass down the order. Don't tell Yi about the death of Qin Feiyang." Understood. The two nodded, picked up the corpses of Lin Shi and Lin Feng, and turned to leave. "Qin Feiyang, you're finally dead. As long as you're dead, Lin Shi and Lin Feng's deaths are worth it." The head of the Lin family returned to his seat with a bright smile on his face. Near the riverbank, Qin Feiyang found a cave and hid inside. He bandaged his wounds and prepared to sleep. He was very tired now. Aoo! But at this moment, a wolf's howl sounded outside the cave. White-eyed wolf. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Holding the 3 arrows, he got up and walked to the entrance of the cave. His expression changed drastically. The person who came was indeed Wolf King. But behind Wolf King, there were more than a dozen white wolves. They stood 10 meters away, staring fiercely at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said angrily, "White-eyed wolf, what do you mean by this?" He regretted it. How could a creature like a wolf be trusted? He should have dealt with it early in the morning. Wolf King looked at him coldly, and suddenly spat out an iron box from his mouth. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. The iron box was the size of a palm. It was rusty and looked a bit old. Wolf King growled a few words at Qin Feiyang, then turned around and left with a group of white wolves. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. After Wolf King left, he walked over and picked up the iron box. The moment he opened the iron box, a strong medicinal fragrance assailed his nose. There were actually 5 medicinal pills in the iron box. 2 bone-replenishing pills. 3 healing pills. Qin Feiyang was stunned for a moment. He raised his head and looked in the direction where the Wolf King disappeared. His face was full of guilt as he whispered, "I'm sorry, I've wrongly accused you. But you, this guy, if you want to give me medicinal pills, just give me medicinal pills. Why did you have to make such a big scene? No matter who it is, they will misunderstand." He smiled helplessly and turned to walk into the cave. He was grateful in his heart. Who said that wolves were heartless? Who said that wolves were ferocious? In fact, no matter what kind of beast it was, as long as it was sincere, it could gain the other party's trust. White-eyed wolf, thank you. After taking the healing pill and bone-replenishing pill, Qin Feiyang half lay on the stone wall, muttered to himself, and quickly fell asleep. However, he didn't know. Chapter 10. As night fell, the waning moon rose into the sky. The jungle at night seemed to be covered with a mysterious veil, making people feel awe. So cool. In the cave, Qin Feiyang finally opened his eyes, got up and stretched. After sleeping until now, his whole body was comfortable and full of energy. He checked the wound. Whether it was the arrow wound or the broken thigh, they had almost recovered. Things like elixirs are really magical. Qin Feiyang murmured with a face full of yearning. That's right. He wanted to become an alchemist. After leaving the cave, he looked up at the waning moon. A cold light flashed in his eyes and muttered, "That nightmare has left me. From now on I, Qin Feiyang, will be your nightmare." Whoosh. He took a step and rushed into the jungle. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Suddenly, he stopped next to a big tree and looked around in surprise. Just now, he vaguely saw a white wolf, but in the blink of an eye, it disappeared. It should be because I missed that white-eyed wolf, so I had an illusion. White-eyed wolf, thank you for your elixir. We will meet again if fate allows. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself and sped up, like a ghost in the night, silently galloping. In his hand, he was still holding the 3 arrows. He was reluctant to throw away these 3 arrows. It was not that the 3 arrows were treasures. He wanted to give him a taste of his own medicine. After Qin Feiyang left, more than a dozen white wolves gathered together under the big tree. Woo-woo, Wolf King growled a few times. One of the white wolves ran toward the direction where Qin Feiyang disappeared. Wolf King took the other white wolves back to the Wolf Valley. It's dark, why hasn't Feiyang come back yet? Beside the lake, Yuan Bo stood on a big stone, looking at the entrance and exit. His old eyes were full of worry. Suddenly, a black shadow rushed into the entrance. It's not Fei Yang, it's him. Yuan Bo's eyes narrowed, and a touch of coldness crept up on his face. Swish. The next moment, with a leap, he turned into a streak of light and quickly disappeared into the night. Flight. If Qin Feiyang saw this scene, he would definitely be shocked. Because only combat emperors could fly. Which was also to say that Uncle Yuan wasn't as simple as he seemed on the surface. A dozen breaths later, the black figure stopped by the lake and scanned the burnt ruins. Strange. Last night, I saw them die in the sea of fire with my own eyes. But why did Elder Ma say that they're still alive? I haven't seen them yet, the black shadow whispered. That was right. He was the middle-aged man who set the fire last night. Since Elder Ma has said so, I'll take a closer look. The middle-aged man entered the ruins and began to search. Zoom. Another black shadow ran into the entrance of the lake, panting. He was Qin Feiyang. He carried a black bull on his shoulder. This was something he had encountered along the way. He had killed it along the way and planned to bring it back to make a sumptuous dinner. Uncle Yuan, I've made you wait for a long time. Qin Feiyang shouted. Under the hazy moonlight, everything looked very blurry. He thought that the middle-aged man in the ruins was Uncle Yuan. Qin Feiyang. Hearing the shout, the middle-aged man suddenly turned around, his eyes surging with killing intent. Little bastard, you can't even burn to death, you're really lucky. He laughed sinisterly and rushed towards Qin Feiyang with a murderous aura. As the distance got closer, Qin Feiyang could gradually distinguish that black figure. Uncle Yuan wasn't that tall and sturdy. Not Uncle Yuan. He put down the black bull on his shoulder, stuck the 3 arrows into the ground, stopped in place and said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why are you here?" The middle-aged man sneered. "I'm the one who wants your life." "It's you." Qin Feiyang's eyes surged with killing intent. He had just heard this voice last night. How could he forget it? "Last night, you burned my house and Uncle Yuan's house. Tonight, I want your life," he said coldly, like a furious lion, rushing towards the middle-aged man. Huh. The middle-aged man was surprised. He actually dared to take the initiative to rush up? This little bastard. Could it be that he was burned silly last night? But it's just what I want. I'll deal with it quickly and give Elder Ma a satisfactory explanation as soon as possible. He clenched his right hand ready to attack. Qin Feiyang was also secretly accumulating power. Go to hell. Both of them were aggressive. As they approached, they roared at the same time, breaking the quiet atmosphere here. Bang! Thump! The 2 fists collided violently. At that moment, Qin Feiyang was shocked back. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. "How is this possible?" the middle-aged man exclaimed. Although he was as steady as Mount Tai, his face became extremely ugly. "Aren't you unable to cultivate? But why is your strength so strong? How can an ordinary person have the strength of 6 bears? He looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. At the same time, a white wolf appeared at the entrance of the lake. It stood on top of a huge rock, and its eyes emitted a frightening green light in the night. Why would a wolf appear? Uncle Yuan, who was hiding in the dark, frowned slightly. The white wolf glanced at Qin Feiyang and the middle-aged man. There was a flash of fierceness in its eyes. It turned around and ran wildly, quickly disappearing into the mountain stream. Except for Uncle Yuan, Qin Feiyang and the middle-aged man did not notice the appearance of the white wolf. After Qin Feiyang stabilized his body, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and joked. "Are you surprised? It's still early." He took out the 10 body-tempering pills and stuffed them all into his mouth. The majestic energy flowed endlessly, tempering his body quickly. Qin Feiyang said lightly, "Your strength is not much stronger than mine. If I'm not wrong, you should be a 7-star martial artist." "Should be?" The middle-aged man was stunned and grinned. "From your tone, you seem to be very disdainful of me?" Qin Feiyang grinned and said, "It's not seems, it's true." "Haha." The middle-aged man laughed maniacally. "Little bastard, you have to pay the price for being so arrogant." He suddenly roared and his aura surged. His big fan-like hand slapped toward Qin Feiyang. "Who's afraid of you?" Qin Feiyang laughed heartily. He rushed forward fearlessly and started to fight with the middle-aged man. Initially, Qin Feiyang was at a disadvantage and was suppressed by the middle-aged man. However, he was like a cockroach that could not be killed. Every time he was sent flying or knocked down, he would stand up again and continue to fight. The more he fought, the braver he became. His aura was also getting stronger. On the other hand, the middle-aged man began to show signs of being flustered. Oh no, he must have taken the body-tempering pill. He wants to use this fight to quickly absorb the energy of the body-tempering pill and break through to become a 7-star martial artist. The middle-aged man finally discovered Qin Feiyang's purpose. I won't let you have your way. He was furious and threw a punch at Qin Feiyang's face with all his might. Bang! At the same time, Qin Feiyang's aura was like a volcanic eruption. It was unstoppable and instantly reached a new height. 7-star martial artist. The real battle has only just begun. His aura was like a rainbow and his gaze was like 2 bolts of lightning, extremely sharp. He threw a punch without retreating and it collided with the middle-aged man's fist. Bang! Both of them retreated at the same time, spitting blood from their mouths. Little bastard, I'm going to kill you. The middle-aged man was extremely furious. Every punch that he threw was accompanied by an ear-piercing sound of wind and thunder. Qin Feiyang didn't say anything, but the corners of his mouth were slightly raised, and there was a trace of ridicule that couldn't be dissolved. No matter how strong the middle-aged man's fist was, he didn't take a step back. He wanted to use strength to break strength. After being unable to kill Qin Feiyang for a long time, the middle-aged man began to become irritable. He revealed more and more flaws with each passing breath. After a few hundred breaths, the two of them were bathed in blood. However, most of the blood on Qin Feiyang's body belonged to the middle-aged man. One of them was impetuous and had even thought of retreating. One of them was calm and steady with endless fighting spirit. The outcome of this battle had been decided. Bang! In the end, Qin Feiyang slapped the middle-aged man's chest. Accompanied by a cracking sound, a few ribs in his chest broke on the spot. The middle-aged man spat out blood and flew a few meters away before falling to the ground. Qin Feiyang had a fierce look in his eyes. He landed beside the middle-aged man in a few steps and stomped on the middle-aged man's chest. This time, his entire chest had caved in. Ah! The middle-aged man's painful scream echoed in the night sky and did not dissipate for a long time. Qin Feiyang looked at him condescendingly and said coldly, Uncle Yuan said last night to kill you within 3 days. I will definitely do it. Don't kill me. I also received orders from above to kill you. Please spare my life, okay? The middle-aged man vomited blood while begging intermittently. Qin Feiyang said, Ma Hongmei's order? The middle-aged man said, It is indeed Ma Hongmei who wants to kill you, but there are still people above me. As long as you promise not to kill me, I will tell you everything. I must kill you. As for the people above you, I will kill 1 if 1 comes, I will kill 2 if 2 come. Qin Feiyang's domineering aura reached the clouds. His foot exerted force, and the middle-aged man's heart suddenly exploded. Blood splattered on the spot. Feiyang, Uncle Yuan can finally be sure that you have really grown up. Uncle Yuan's voice sounded in the darkness. Qin Feiyang looked towards the direction of the voice. A black shadow walked out from behind a bush. Uncle Yuan. He was overjoyed and hurriedly went up to greet him. Just now, he was afraid that Uncle Yuan had met with misfortune. Now that he saw Uncle Yuan safe and sound, he was relieved. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and blamed himself. Uncle Yuan, I am sorry for making you worry again. Uncle Yuan laughed. Silly boy. Why are you apologizing to Uncle Yuan? You came back so late. You must have something to deal with. Uncle Yuan will not blame you. Qin Feiyang rubbed his head and said, Thank you, Uncle Yuan. Uncle Yuan shook his head and laughed. He looked at the dead middle-aged man and said in a deep voice, Feiyang, he is from the Black Demon Stronghold. The Black Demon Stronghold is an organization that specializes in assassination. Every member is a fugitive. As long as there is enough gold, no matter who it is, they will dare to kill. Black Demon Stronghold? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, Uncle Yuan means that Ma Hongmei gave the Black Demon Stronghold some benefits. That is for sure. The people of the Black Demon Stronghold are all ruthless people who only care about profits. Uncle Yuan laughed and continued, but the Black Demon Stronghold is very honest. They have a rule. If someone does not complete the mission, they will continue to send people to assassinate until the target is dead. Chapter 11. Qin Feiyang's eyes darkened. Uncle Yuan's meaning was already very clear. The Black Demon Stronghold would still send people to assassinate him. Uncle Yuan asked, Feiyang, what are you going to do? I'll borrow your words. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earthweir. Qin Feiyang raised his head to look at the waning moon, his eyes bursting with a strong cold light. Uncle Yuan nodded, very pleased. This is for you. Uncle Yuan took out a white dagger from his chest. But outside the dagger, there was a wooden sheath similar to a sword sheath. This wooden sheath was just cut by Uncle Yuan. Qin Feiyang took it in his hand, gently pulled out the dagger, carefully looking at every place. The dagger was as white as jade. Every part was carefully polished and carved. If he did not personally experience it, Qin Feiyang would definitely think that it was just a beautiful ornament. This dagger is called Chang Shui. It can cut iron like mud. It will be of great help to you in the future. You must take good care of it. Uncle Yuan warned. Qin Feiyang nodded, puzzled. Uncle Yuan, where did you put this dagger before? Uncle Yuan smiled. The dagger and the marrow cleansing pill, I used to put them in that secret room. No wonder I've never seen it before. Qin Feiyang suddenly realized, looked up at Uncle Yuan, said, Uncle Yuan, now can you tell me, why do you have the marrow cleansing pill? And why do you have this dagger? Do you know why those people in the capital want to harm me? Uncle Yuan's eyes flashed, smiled. Feiyang, wait until you're 16 years old, then I'll tell you everything. Qin Feiyang frowned. 3 days later, he would be 15 years old. There was still a whole year before he was 16 years old. What was Uncle Yuan hiding? Why didn't he tell him? Uncle Yuan took out the jade box, smiled. The rest of the bone replenishing pill and healing pill, I'll give it to you. Qin Feiyang received the jade box, looking at Uncle Yuan without blinking. In the end, he secretly sighed, giving up the idea of asking, because he had already seen that Uncle Yuan did not intend to tell him at all. Uncle Yuan, wait a moment. I'll cook for you. Qin Feiyang started a bonfire and ran to the black bull. He pulled out the Chang Shui and cut off one of the bull's legs. Uncle Yuan's face twitched. This brat really didn't know the value of Chang Shui. Meanwhile, a man and a woman, each holding an iron bow, galloped towards the lake under the moonlight. It was Lin Gu and Lin Gua. However, they didn't enter the entrance. They concealed themselves on a mountaintop, looking towards Qin Feiyang and Uncle Yuan. Qin Feiyang didn't die? Their expressions changed instantly. That's impossible. We saw him fall from the cliff with our own eyes. Lin Gu muttered, his face full of disbelief. Not only is Qin Feiyang not dead, but Qin Yuan is also not dead. What is going on with Ma Hongmei? Lin Gua frowned. Lin Gua, look, isn't there a corpse lying beside them? Lin Gu was surprised. The bonfire burned brightly, illuminating the land. It's indeed a corpse. It's just that it's too far away, so I can't see it clearly. But I'm sure that person was sent by Ma Hongmei. Lin Gua said in a low voice. Even the person sent by Ma Hongmei died here. Could it be that Qin Feiyang and Qin Yuan? Lin Gu couldn't help but think of the scene during the day. His whole body suddenly turned cold. The fact is already very obvious. Whether it's Qin Feiyang or Qin Yuan, they aren't simple characters. You stay here and monitor them. I'll go back and report to the family head. If I don't come back in an hour, you go back by yourself. Lin Gua whispered. Lin Gu nodded. Lin Gua looked at Qin Feiyang and Qin Yuan. Her eyes flashed and she quietly got up. However, when she turned around, she suddenly froze in place. Why aren't you leaving? Seeing Lin Gua not moving, Lin Gu turned his head and asked in confusion. But the next moment, his face instantly turned pale. They seemed to have seen something inconceivable. At the foot of the mountain, they didn't know when, but there were many pairs of green eyes. At first glance, it was like clusters of ghost fire flickering. It was extremely frightening. Wolves. Lin Guo and Qin Yuan trembled. Only the eyes of wolves would emit green light at night. 1 wolf, 10 wolves. More than 50 white wolves stood side by side at the foot of the mountain, cutting off their retreat. The eyes of the Wolf King, who was leading the pack, were filled with hatred. All of a sudden, it raised its head and howled at the waning moon in the sky. The more than 50 white wolves behind it immediately took a step forward, pressing up the mountain step by step. Wolf howl. Beside the bonfire, Uncle Yuan frowned. It's him. However, Qin Feiyang suddenly got up and turned to look at the entrance. Uncle Yuan, you stay here and don't move. I'll go take a look. He left behind a sentence and ran in front of the black bull. He grabbed the 3 arrows and ran towards the entrance. What the hell is this brat doing? Uncle Yuan frowned, got up and followed him unhurriedly. On the top of the mountain, Lin Gu looked at the pack of wolves and said anxiously, Lin Guo, what should we do now? They had already recognized it. The Wolf King in the lead was the wolf that was with Qin Feiyang during the day. Although both of them were 7-star martial artists, they couldn't help but feel nervous in the face of more than 50 ferocious wolves. The nature of wolves is cunning and treacherous. They will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. We seriously injured it during the day. Now it will definitely not give up easily. To catch bandits, one must first catch the leader. Let's shoot that Wolf King first. Lin Guo's eyes were filled with murderous intent. She took out 3 arrows from the quiver behind her back. She pulled the bow and loaded the arrows. Whoosh! 3 arrows whizzed out, carrying a shocking sharpness, and shot towards the Wolf King. The Wolf King's eyes flashed with an ominous glint. It exerted force with its 4 limbs and leaped several meters into the air. The 3 arrows brushed past its body and hit a large rock. Sparks flew in all directions and an ear-piercing metallic sound reverberated. Die. But Lin Gu seized the opportunity and quickly shot an arrow when the Wolf King landed on the ground. The Wolf King was in midair and there was no way to dodge this arrow. In the nick of time, a white wolf rushed into the air and blocked the arrow for the Wolf King. It died on the spot. Bang! It fell to the ground and rolled down the slope towards the foot of the mountain, crushing a large patch of weeds and shrubs. Roar! The Wolf King's eyes turned red. After landing on the ground, it roared towards the sky and rushed towards Lin Guo and Lin Gu crazily. The rest of the white wolves also went crazy. Their ferocious aura was monstrous. Lin Guo and Lin Gu's eyes were gloomy as they continuously shot arrows at the Wolf King. But either the Wolf King dodged the arrows, or the other white wolves blocked the arrows for the Wolf King. A pungent smell of blood quickly spread through the area. Lin Guo, I've run out of arrows. Looking at the pack of wolves running towards them crazily, Lin Gu couldn't help but panic. The total number of arrows in their quiver was only 30. 30 arrows had killed 20 white wolves, leaving only 30 or so. If they swarmed up, even if they were 7-star martial artists, they would have to pay a heavy price. Kill. Lin Guo's arrows were also used up. There was only one way now, to kill all these beasts. The 2 of them held iron bows and charged into the pack of wolves, starting a life-and-death battle. Qin Feiyang ran to the foot of the mountain, glanced at the dead white wolves, and looked up. Lin Guo, Lin Gu, give me your lives. He roared like a crazy bull and rushed up angrily. Without saying a word, he directly raised his fist and pounced towards Lin Gu. Qin Feiyang, a trash like you wants to kill me? You're daydreaming. Lin Gu threw a punch. The 2 fists met with a loud bang. Puff! Lin Gu spat out a mouthful of blood and crashed to the ground. How is this possible? His eyes were filled with disbelief. At the same time, Qin Feiyang was also forced back. However, he grabbed a bush and stabilized his body. Like the incarnation of a hungry wolf, he pounced on Lin Gu while Lin Gu was distracted. The 3 arrows in his hand pierced into Lin Gu's right shoulder fiercely. Poochie! Blood splattered in the sky. The heart-wrenching pain made Lin Gu scream endlessly. Qin Feiyang pulled out the 3 arrows and turned to pounce on Lin Guo. The few white wolves beside him swarmed forward and mercilessly tore Lin Gu apart. The scene was extremely bloody. It was too horrible to look at. He's actually a 7-star martial artist. Lin Guo's eyes also revealed a look of horror. looking at Qin Feiyang, who was pouncing crazily with a face full of murderous intent. She suddenly felt very unfamiliar. Suddenly, a white wolf pounced forward, bit her arm, and pulled her to the ground. Lingua, your time of death has come, Qin Feiyang roared. The moment he pounced, the 3 bloody arrows in his hands suddenly pierced into Lingua's calf. He had said before that he would give them a taste of their own medicine. Ah! Lingua screamed in pain. She waved the iron bow in her hand wildly. A few white wolves that were about to rush forward were beaten until their heads were bleeding. Qin Feiyang's shoulder also suffered a blow. His skin and flesh were lacerated. Qin Feiyang, I'm going to kill you. Lingua's face was ferocious. She raised the iron bow high and smashed it toward Qin Feiyang's head. Qin Feiyang sneered, pulled out the chang shui, and swung it with force. Accompanied by a loud clang, the iron bow was actually cut in half. How is this possible? Lingua was shocked. More than a dozen white wolves swarmed forward and crazily tore at her. Screams could be heard incessantly. Qin Feiyang put away the dagger and let out a long breath. He wiped the blood off his face and walked to the Wolf King's side. He smiled and said, "White-eyed wolf, we meet again so soon. It's really fate." The white-eyed wolf glanced at him with a trace of disdain. Qin Feiyang chuckled and said, "Don't be so unreasonable. Let's go, I'll treat you to a big meal." The scene here was too bloody. He did not want to continue staying here. Roar! The Wolf King growled at him. "What are you trying to say?" Qin Feiyang was puzzled. The Wolf King growled a few more times. Seeing that Qin Feiyang still did not understand, he simply howled and led more than 30 white wolves to the foot of the mountain ferociously, leaving Qin Feiyang with a proud back view. "Don't go!" Qin Feiyang hurriedly shouted. "It wants you to help it bury these dead white wolves. Moreover, it's going to Iron Ox Town to cause trouble for the Lin family." Chapter 12. Go to the Lin clan. Qin Feiyang's body shook. Uncle Yuan walked to Qin Feiyang's side and shook his head. Wolves are very vengeful creatures. If they are provoked, they will do whatever it takes. They will not let go of anyone who is related to them. No, the Lin clan is full of experts. Once they enter the Iron Ox Town, they will die. I have to stop them. Uncle Yuan, help me bury them. Qin Feiyang left behind these words and chased after the pack of wolves with swift steps. Uncle Yuan reached out his hand and wanted to stop Qin Feiyang. However, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Wolves are not only cold-blooded, but also proud. Feiyang, this child, dares to be friends with wolves. This courage is incredible. Why don't we let him go? Maybe he can create a miracle. Uncle Yuan whispered. Seeing Qin Feiyang grow stronger day by day, he was happy from the bottom of his heart. "White-eyed wolf, wait for me." Qin Feiyang's shout suddenly sounded in the forest, startling a flock of birds. The Wolf King turned around and looked at him. Then, with a low growl, it brought the wolves to a stop. Qin Feiyang quickly caught up and stopped in front of Wolf King. He shook his head and said, "White-eyed wolf, you can't go to the Iron Ox Town." Wolf King grimaced and looked at him fiercely. "Even if you stare at me, I will stop you." The Lin clan has hundreds of martial artists and 10 one-star martial masters. The head of the Lin clan is even a 2-star martial master. With your strength, you are not enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Besides, other than the Lin clan, the Iron Ox Town also has the Zhao clan. The Zhao clan's foundation is not inferior to the Lin clan's. There is also the Dan Hall and the Martial Arts Hall. These 2 forces are even stronger than the Zhao clan and the Lin clan. If you barge into the Iron Ox Town like this, they will not sit still. Not only you, but the whole wolf pack will be annihilated. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. The Wolf King lowered his head, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said with a sly smile, "If you really want to vent your anger, let's go to another place." Wolf King raised his head and looked at him with a puzzled expression. "Let's go to the Black Demon Stronghold," Qin Feiyang said word by word. Wolf King's pupils contracted, as if he was afraid of this place. Qin Feiyang said, "If you dare to go to Iron Ox Town, don't tell me you don't dare to go to Heimo Zhai?" The Wolf King seemed to have been provoked. A hint of viciousness crawled up from its bell-sized eyes. It turned around and growled at the 30 or so white wolves. The white wolves also growled a few times at Wolf King, then turned around and ran towards the direction of the Wolf Valley. Wolf King turned around and looked at Qin Feiyang with a hint of provocation in his eyes. Qin Feiyang gave him a thumbs up and said with a smile, "Wolf King is indeed Wolf King. But do you know where He Emojai is?" Wolf King nodded. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "Lead the way." Whoosh! A man and a wolf galloped towards the south. When he learned from Uncle Yuan that He Emojai would continue to send people to assassinate him, Qin Feiyang had already conceived the idea of eliminating He Emojai. But he knew, with his current strength, he could not deal with those outlaws who killed without batting an eye. So this time he only wanted to teach He Emojai a lesson. He wanted to let the people of He Emojai know that he, Qin Feiyang, was not to be trifled with. Compete in ruthlessness? He could be more ruthless than anyone. Compete in craziness? He could be crazier than anyone. If there was a chance to wipe out He Emojai, he would definitely not be polite. 2 hours later, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King stopped on the shore of a river and looked across the river. On the opposite shore, there was a stone tablet, 3 meters high and 1.5 meters wide, engraved with 2 lines of large words. Unannounced. Not allowed to enter. Under the stone tablet, there was a pile of bones. Under the hazy moonlight, it looked a little creepy. Behind the stone tablet, it was a dense forest, giving off a gloomy atmosphere. "Do you think I'll be afraid of a pile of bones?" Qin Feiyang sneered and was about to cross the river. But Wolf King bit his pants and did not let him enter the water. "What are you doing?" Qin Feiyang lowered his head and looked at it in puzzlement. Wolf King rolled its eyes as if it wanted to say something, but it did not know how to express it. Oh! Finally! It simply howled. Then it quickly turned around and hid in the grass. Qin Feiyang's face changed. He hurriedly ran to Wolf King's side and lay in the grass. He found that Wolf King's eyes were fixed on the other side of the river. He also looked at the opposite side. In less than 5 breaths, 2 black shadows ran out from the forest behind the stone tablet. At the same time, Wolf King closed its eyes. Because its eyes would emit a green light in the dark, it was easy to be noticed. Qin Feiyang also finally understood that Wolf King was reminding him that there were sentries in the forest, and to be careful. The 2 black shadows stopped in front of the stone tablet, and suspiciously glanced at Qin Feiyang's side. "I clearly heard a wolf howl just now. Why didn't I find a wolf? Maybe it's just a passing wolf. Let's go back. There are traps everywhere here. Even if a wolf really comes, we don't need to do anything." "That's true. Let's go and continue drinking." The 2 turned around and entered the forest. Trap. Qin Feiyang was awe-inspiring. It seemed that this black demon stronghold was a dragon's pool and tiger's den. "White-eyed wolf, it's not too late if you regret it now," Qin Feiyang whispered. Wolf King opened its eyes, got up and turned around to leave. Hey, you're really leaving? So unloyal?" Qin Feiyang was anxious. Wolf King turned around and grinned at him. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Was this white-eyed wolf flirting with him? Being flirted with by a wolf? This feeling was really good. A man and a wolf tiptoed into the river, swam to the other side, and climbed ashore stealthily. Qin Feiyang pulled out the Chang Shui and warned Wolf King, "Be careful." Next, the man and the wolf didn't dare to be distracted. Every step they took, they had to check in advance to see if there were any traps. It could be said that they were treading on thin ice. Their hard work paid off, and they safely arrived at a wooden house. The wooden house was built with wooden sticks and was very simple. Even the candlelight inside could be seen. There was a burst of noise coming from inside. Qin Feiyang looked inside through a gap. It was the 2 people who were drinking inside. The strength of the people guarding here shouldn't be very good. Qin Feiyang secretly analyzed. Generally, they were small fries who didn't have the ability to carry out the task and were sent here to guard. So these 2 people were definitely weaker than the middle-aged man. At this point, Qin Feiyang gave the Wolf King, who was beside him, a meaningful glance. Then he quietly walked towards the door. After arriving at the door, A man and a wolf looked at each other, and a cold light emerged in their eyes. Whoosh! The two rushed into the wooden house at the same time. Qin Feiyang's target was the man on the left. His big hand reached out like lightning. Like an iron clamp, he grabbed the man's neck tightly, preventing him from opening his mouth to report. Wolf King was extremely fierce. He directly pounced, opened his bloody mouth, and bit the throat of the man on the right. He died on the spot. He didn't even have time to scream. Qin Feiyang was also shocked and broke out in cold sweat. This white-eyed wolf was too fierce. If there was a time when he wasn't paying attention, she would bite his neck. He couldn't help but feel scared. As for the man whose throat was grabbed by Qin Feiyang, he was even more scared. Phew! Qin Feiyang secretly exhaled and asked, "Do you want to live?" The man nodded vigorously. "If you dare to make a sound, I'll crush your throat." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with killing intent. He loosened his grip slightly, and the man gasped for breath. Qin Feiyang said, "How many people are there in the Black Demon stronghold? How strong are they? What do you want to do?" The man looked at him in surprise. Qin Feiyang said, "It's none of your business. Tell me." Okay, I'll tell you." "Help?" The man nodded repeatedly, but suddenly shouted for help. But Qin Feiyang was already prepared. Just as the man opened his mouth, his big hand exerted force and directly crushed the man's throat. These people are indeed fugitives. Qin Feiyang was quite annoyed. He squatted on the ground and groped the two men. "Hey!" Suddenly, his eyes lit up. From the arms of the man on the left, he took out a map. Putting it in front of the candle and looking at it carefully for a while, Qin Feiyang was overjoyed. This was actually a map of traps. All the traps in this forest were clearly marked on it. At the same time, he was surprised again. There were too many traps in the forest. Without this map, he and Wolf King would not have been able to reach the Black Demon stronghold. It was probably because there were too many traps that this person had a map on him. "White-eyed wolf, follow me closely," Qin Feiyang instructed, took the map, and soon arrived outside a stronghold. The two of them hid in a half-meter deep ditch, stuck their heads out and scanned the stronghold. At this time, it was already midnight. The people of the Black Demon stronghold had already fallen asleep. It was quiet here. Only two middle-aged men stood upright on both sides of the gate, closely monitoring the surroundings. Above the gate, there was a torch that shone in all directions. The two of them were topless, and there were a few hideous scars on their bodies, emitting a fierce aura. There are so many traps, and they still let people guard here. The people of the Black Demon stronghold are really cautious. Qin Feiyang frowned and asked in a low voice, "White-eyed wolf, are you confident that you can get rid of them in one fell swoop?" Wolf King shook his head. "The strength of the two seems to be very strong," Qin Feiyang muttered, looking at the dagger Chang Shui in his hand. This dagger could cut iron like mud. If it was a surprise attack, it should be able to get rid of the two people. "White-eyed wolf, go and distract one of them," Qin Feiyang whispered. Wolf King slowly crawled to the other side, rubbing against a tree as thick as an arm. Soon, the two middle-aged men noticed the movement there. The man on the right wondered, "Why is that tree shaking? Go and take a look." The man on the left nodded and walked towards the tree. Seeing this, Wolf King hurriedly retreated, got into a lush bush, and then closed his eyes. At the same time, Qin Feiyang picked up a fist-sized stone at his feet, and then gently threw it. It landed in the grass 1 meter away, making a slight sound. And Chapter 13. Qin Feiyang held his breath and stared at the big man through the gaps between the weeds. But the result was beyond his expectations. The big man did not come to check. "What should I do?" Qin Feiyang was burning with anxiety. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He took out the iron box given to him by Wolf King, took out a bone-replenishing pill, and placed it on the grass above. "I don't believe that you won't be fooled this time." Qin Feiyang sneered. In this world, what was the most tempting thing? It was none other than the pill. The fragrance of the medicine quickly drifted in this place. Why is there the smell of the pill? After smelling the medicine, The big man was suddenly surprised. He sniffed hard and walked towards Qin Feiyang step by step. It's really a pill. It seems to be a bone-replenishing pill. This time I'm rich. When he saw the bone-replenishing pill on the grass, the big man was wild with joy and reached out to grab it. He had never thought about why the pill would be here. At this time, Qin Feiyang jumped up like a poisonous snake hidden in the dark. The dagger Chang Shui showed its sharpness and instantly cut the big man's throat. Blood spurted out. At the same time, he stretched out his left hand, covered the big man's mouth and dragged him into the deep ditch. In less than 3 breaths, the big man breathed his last and fell to the ground dead. Before he died, he stared at Qin Feiyang, his eyes full of disbelief. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. This dagger Chang Shui was more terrifying than he imagined. He restrained his mind, quickly took off the big man's clothes, wiped the blood on the grass, and tidied up the grass a little. Although there were still some obvious traces, it was late at night. As long as one did not look carefully, they would not notice. As for the smell of blood, the medicinal fragrance of the bone-replenishing pill was enough to cover it up. Qin Feiyang placed the bone-replenishing pill in a slightly conspicuous place and continued to hide in the deep trench, waiting for another big man to take the bait. The middle-aged man walked under the tree and scanned the surroundings. He didn't find anything out of the ordinary, so he went back the way he came with a trace of doubt. When he returned to the gate of the stronghold and saw that his companions had disappeared, he did not suspect anything and thought that they had gone to the latrine. Medicinal fragrance? Very soon. He also smelled the medicinal fragrance. A trace of suspicion crept into his eyes as he walked towards the direction of the medicinal fragrance. As expected, he was killed by Qin Feiyang's sneak attack. Using weeds and dead leaves to cover up the 2 corpses, Qin Feiyang put away the bone-replenishing pills and ran towards the tree. "White-eyed wolf, you can come out now," Qin Feiyang shouted in a low voice. Wolf King opened his eyes and walked out of the bushes with a questioning look in his eyes. "Don't worry, it's all settled. Next, we'll give the people of the Black Demon Stronghold a profound lesson." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. Wolf King looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, "Do you see that torch? This stronghold is all made of wood. As long as there's a little fire, the whole stronghold will soon be set ablaze. I'll also let them have a taste of being burned by fire." Wolf King's pupils constricted. This human was even more ferocious than it. "Let's go," Qin Feiyang shouted, turned around and ran to the gate of the stronghold. He found a wooden stick as thick as an arm, and quickly made a torch with weeds and dead branches. "This torch is for you." He handed the torch to Wolf King. Wolf King bit it. Qin Feiyang leaped up and pulled out the torch stuck on top of the stronghold's gate. He lit the torch held by the Wolf King and said in a low voice, "We'll split up, we'll meet behind the stronghold later." A man and a wolf rushed into the stronghold at the same time, looking for flammable objects. In less than 10 breaths, in the stronghold, the flames were monstrous. One by one, the wooden huts and buildings were set ablaze. "It's so hot. So much smoke. What's happening outside?" The people of the Black Demon Stronghold woke up from their sleep one after another. When they opened the door to take a look, without exception, their faces suddenly changed. "Not good. The stronghold is on fire. Come out and put out the fire." The entire stronghold was suddenly in a mess. One figure after another ran out of the house, carrying water to put out the fire. But, under the hot weather, everything became very dry. Not only did the flames not extinguish, but they burned more and more fiercely. There were even quite a few people whose bodies were on fire. "What's going on?" A loud roar sounded from a burning building. A burly man in black smashed the door with one foot and rushed out of the flames. "Leader, I don't know what's going on, but the stronghold suddenly caught fire. A few of our brothers have been burned to death." "Cough cough, leader, think of a way." A group of people surrounded him, extremely flustered. The burly man scanned his surroundings, his face extremely gloomy. The entire stronghold had almost turned into a sea of fire, trapping them inside. This is not a natural fire. If it's a natural fire, it's impossible to be on fire on all sides. This is man-made. Someone wants to set us on fire. Who the hell is it? Get out of here. The burly man roared. Leader, I just saw a wolf. Leader, I also seem to have seen an unfamiliar figure. The two killers ran to the burly man and said anxiously, Where are they? The burly man was furious. The smoke is too thick, we can't see clearly. The two shook their heads. Damn it, find them. How dare they come to burn our black demon stronghold? I swear I won't stop until I tear them into pieces. The burly man roared. Master, please save me. But before he finished speaking, a few screams were heard. A few killers were shrouded in flames as they ran toward the leader and his group while crying for help. Leader, let's take our brothers and retreat first. It won't be too late to find them after we escape. A slightly older man in black stood out and said to the burly man. This person seemed to have some prestige in the black demon stronghold, and the others nodded in agreement. The burly man gritted his teeth and nodded. All right, you take everyone and escape. What about you? The old man in black asked. The wealth we accumulated over the years is all in the cellar. I'm going to take it all out. Wisps of white light emerged from the burly man's body and covered his entire body. After saying that, he turned around and rushed into the building without looking back. Don't worry, the leader has true chi protecting his body. The flames won't hurt him in a short period of time. Come with me. The old man in black roared and waved his palm forward. A stream of true chi spurted out from his palm and forcefully separated the sea of flames in front of him. The survivors of the black demon's stronghold followed behind the old man in black and quickly fled outside. As for those who were burned by the flames, they didn't even look at them and acted extremely indifferent. Behind the stronghold, on a small hill, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King lay in the grass and looked at the black demon's stronghold covered in flames with a trace of pleasure in their eyes. Burning the black demon's stronghold was too satisfying. Qin Feiyang looked at the Chang Shui in his hand and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He turned to Wolf King and said, White-eyed wolf, do you want to play a big game? Wolf King looked at him in confusion as if asking, How? Chapter 14. If it weren't for Chang Shui, Qin Feiyang wouldn't have dared to have such a crazy idea. That was because the black demon stronghold had two martial masters. Martial masters had already grasped true chi. Even a one-star martial master could wield over 10,000 kilograms of force with a casual wave of his hand. With his and Wolf King's strength, it was simply courting death. However, the sharpness that Chang Shui had displayed earlier gave him ample confidence. As long as he caught them off guard, killing a martial master wasn't a fantasy. Wolf King looked at him in shock. Seeing the determination in Qin Feiyang's eyes, it hesitated for a moment before nodding heavily. Since he was going to go crazy, he might as well go completely crazy for once. Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at the forest behind him. There was a mountain range in the distance that stretched out endlessly. It was estimated to be a few thousand meters long. His eyes flashed slightly. He took out the map of the traps and looked at it carefully. The black demon stronghold is surrounded by traps within a radius of 500 meters. If I launch a guerrilla attack here, it seems that I can't go all out. It seems that I have to lure them into that mountain range and destroy them one by one. Black demon stronghold. Even if I can't annihilate all of you tonight, I will still make you suffer great losses. Qin Feiyang muttered. His eyes flashed coldly as he turned to Wolf King and said, Roar and lure them over. Oh. The Wolf King immediately let out a loud howl. It's a wolf. The sound came from behind the stronghold. That wolf is provoking us. The group of people who were fleeing in the sea of fire stopped and turned to look behind the stronghold. Their faces were gloomy and their eyes were filled with killing intent. Don't stop. We'll talk after we get out. The black-clothed old man shouted. He waved his hand and his true chi split the sea of fire in front of him like a dragon. He quickly led the group of people out. However, there were still more than 10 people who died in the sea of fire. Surround him. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. The black-clothed old man shouted. There were a total of more than 50 people who escaped alive. Hearing the black-clothed old man's order, they immediately split into two groups. They bypassed the sea of fire and ran toward the back of the stronghold murderously. Retreat! Qin Feiyang shouted in a low voice. Leading Wolf King, he easily bypassed the traps and ran towards the mountain range. They're over there. Chase them. The people of the Black Demon stronghold took out a trap map and chased after Qin Feiyang. The old man in black stood on the hillside and stared at Qin Feiyang's back. He frowned and whispered, "Why does he look so familiar?" Boom. The burly man split open the sea of flames and quickly arrived beside the black-clothed old man. He looked at Qin Feiyang and Wolf King and asked, "Is it them?" "That's right, they seem to be provoking us." The old man in black sneered. "Provoke us? They really don't know what's good for them." "Wait, how did they know the location of the trap?" The burly man frowned. Every time they reached a trap, the man and the wolf would go around it. It was as if they knew the traps like the back of their hands. "If I'm not wrong, the 2 sentries have been killed by them. The trap map must have fallen into their hands, but this is no longer important." The old man in black sneered and asked, "Leader, are the treasures lost?" "They're all here. But fortunately, I got there in time. Otherwise, they would all be burned." The burly man patted the qiankuan bag tied to his waist. The old man in black glanced at the qiankuan bag and sneered. "Since they provoked us, we'll do as they wish. Let's go." The 2 of them took large strides and chased after Qin Feiyang and his companion with strong killing intent. At this moment, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King had already left the range of the trap and turned to look at the pursuers behind them. "Keep chasing if you have the guts." Qin Feiyang laughed mischievously. "Ow." Wolf King also howled, full of provocation. "Don't run if you have the guts." A short middle-aged man roared angrily. "Hurry up, don't let me wait for too long." Qin Feiyang smiled playfully and turned to run towards the mountain range with Wolf King. Including the leader of the Black Demon stronghold and the old man in black, there are a total of 53 people. White-eyed wolf, looks like we're going to have a massacre tonight. Ow ow. A man and a wolf looked at each other and quickly disappeared into the mountain range. After a few dozen breaths, the people of the Black Demon stronghold also entered the mountain range one after another. They stood at a high point and scanned the dense forest in front of them. "Where are they?" The burly man and his companion rushed over and frowned. "They're gone. They're probably hiding and preparing to play guerrilla warfare with us." "Leader, why do I feel like that kid looks familiar? I remember now. He's that Qin Feiyang, the person that the Pill Hall's elder Ma wants to kill. Didn't they send someone to kill him? Did they fail?" Everyone was surprised. The old man in black said, "They must have failed. Otherwise he wouldn't appear here. Looks like he's here for revenge." "Humph, since they're here, don't even think about leaving alive. Quickly go and find them. Even if we have to turn this mountain range upside down, we have to find them." The burly man shouted coldly with a murderous aura. "Let's go." The 51 people were like hungry wolves going down the mountain. They entered the dense forest in 2s and 3s and started a carpet search. After a few hundred breaths, 2 middle-aged men entered a small forest to search. "What do you think this Qin Feiyang is capable of? He actually dares to come and burn down our Black Demon stronghold? I'm also puzzled. Doesn't he know that every member of our Black Demon stronghold is an assassin that makes people tremble in fear?" The 2 of them chatted as they searched. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang jumped down from a tree. The chang shui in his hand revealed its sharpness and directly pierced into the skull of one of them. "Ah!" That person screamed and died on the spot. His companion beside him was shocked. He turned his head and saw Qin Feiyang smiling at him. "Qin Feiyang is here." At the same time he shouted. He threw a punch at Qin Feiyang. Crash. The withered branches and rotten leaves beside him were suddenly lifted. Wolf King flew out, full of hostility. It bit that person's ankle and pulled hard. Caught off guard, that person cried out in alarm and immediately fell down. Qin Feiyang held the chang shui and fiercely pierced into the back of that person's head. There was no suspense. That person's blood splattered on the spot. Happy cooperation. Qin Feiyang wiped the blood on his face and grinned at Wolf King. "Oh, Wolf King also growled excitedly. Let's go. After pulling out the Chang Shui, the man and wolf quickly disappeared. After a dozen breaths, Dada accompanied by hurried footsteps, 3 ferocious-looking burly men ran over quickly. Looking at the 2 corpses on the ground, their expressions were gloomy. At this moment, 2 painful screams could be heard not far away. The 3 burly men looked at each other and hurried over. There were 2 more corpses on the ground. As for Qin Feiyang and Wolf King, they were nowhere to be seen. They are all 7-star and 8-star martial artists. Elder Ma said that Qin Feiyang is just a good-for-nothing who can't cultivate. That white wolf's ability is only equivalent to a 6-star martial artist. How did they do it? Look, there is a neat wound on their head and chest. It seems to be caused by a dagger. It seems that Qin Feiyang has a very frightening weapon in his hands. The 3 burly men scanned the surroundings. There was a gleam in their eyes. That was greed. However, they did not notice that the withered leaves under the 2 corpses were moving. A hand holding a dagger suddenly stretched out from the withered leaves and cut the tendons of the 3 men at lightning speed. Bang bang bang. The 3 burly men suddenly fell to the ground and screamed. Blood spurted out from their wounds. Bang bang. Crash. The 2 corpses were sent flying by a huge force. Qin Feiyang and Wolf King leaped out from the withered leaves below and pounced on the 3 men. Wolf King bit one man's throat. Qin Feiyang also cut another man's throat in an instant. Spare my life, the 3rd man begged. His soul was leaving his body. However, Qin Feiyang did not show any mercy. He waved the Chang Shui and quickly cut off the man's neck. You still have the idea of using the Chang Shui. How foolish. Qin Feiyang sneered and quickly left with Wolf King to look for the next prey. Chapter 15. It was a night of bloodshed. Under the hazy moonlight, in the dark forest, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King were like 2 ghosts, coming and going without a trace. From time to time, screams could be heard in the mountain range. 3 hours later, in a valley, a man and a wolf cooperated seamlessly and quickly took care of another killer. This is the 50th. There's only one left. Qin Feiyang grabbed the Chang Shui and bathed in blood, as if he had transformed into a killing god. Wolf King was the same. Its white fur was dyed red with blood. Its green eyes were filled with a terrifying murderous light. Let's go and take care of the last one. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and quickly left the valley with Wolf King, rushing into the dense forest. What's going on? Why are all the people screaming from my black demon stronghold? Could it be that the bastard and Qin Feiyang have been possessed by a ghost? A short middle-aged man leaned against a big tree and looked around vigilantly. His companions died one by one. Screams rang out one after another. It was like a death sentence, almost making him collapse. What's going on now? Are they killers? Or are Qin Feiyang and Wolf King the killers? He really couldn't understand. It was a complete reversal. No, I can't stay here any longer, or I'll definitely die. Killers, whether it was psychological quality or endurance, were far superior to ordinary people. But now, the short middle-aged man was scared. He didn't have the slightest bit of courage to face Qin Feiyang and Wolf King, these 2 fiends. He turned around and ran out of the mountain range without looking back. But when he ran in front of a horizontal ditch, Qin Feiyang and Wolf King pounced and directly stabbed the Chang Shui into his heart. I still can't escape. If there's an afterlife, I'll never be a killer again. In the past, it was me who killed others. Now I'm the one being killed. This is retribution. The short middle-aged man muttered a few words. With a bang, he fell to the ground and died with regret. It's too late for you to realize it now, Qin Feiyang muttered. He raised his head and sneered. It's time to take care of those 2 leaders. White-eyed wolf, it won't be easy to deal with them. We must be careful. Wolf King nodded with a ferocious look in his eyes. Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the horizon. He led Wolf King into the forest to look for the 2 people. The sky was already starting to turn white. The Black Demon Stronghold Chief and the black-clothed old man were both martial masters. The only advantage Qin Feiyang and Wolf King had was the night. If he couldn't get rid of the two of them before daybreak, he could only give up. In less than an hour, Qin Feiyang found the Black Demon Stronghold's chief and his companion. He and Wolf King hid behind a big tree. They looked ahead with a trace of doubt in their eyes. 100 meters away, there was a barren hill about 50 to 60 meters high. The Black Demon Stronghold chief and the black-clothed old man were standing side by side on the hill. They were extremely eye-catching. Woo-woo, Wolf King growled at Qin Feiyang as if asking, "When are we going to make a move?" "There's a problem. Let's wait a little longer," Qin Feiyang whispered. On the hill, the black-clothed old man scanned the forest below and frowned. "Chief, aren't we a little too eye-catching standing here?" the Black Demon Stronghold chief said. "This is the effect I want." The black-clothed old man pondered carefully and came to a realization. He smiled and said, "Chief is wise. The view here is wide. As long as we stand here, Qin Feiyang and that beast won't be able to sneak attack us even if they discover us." "That's right. If they don't appear, they won't have anywhere to hide when the sun rises. At that time, we'll have the final say in killing them," the Black Demon Stronghold chief sneered. "Sigh, it's a pity that those people are probably all dead," the black-clothed old man sighed. "They're all useless trash. So what if they're dead? It's no big deal. Besides, it's good for us if they're dead. We can take all these treasures for ourselves." The Black Demon Stronghold chief sneered. At the same time, a fierce light flickered in the depths of his eyes. Moreover, there was a dark dagger hidden in his sleeve that shone with a cold light. "That's right. In that case, we should thank Qin Feiyang," the black-clothed old man chuckled. However, he glanced at the cosmos bag tied to the Black Demon Stronghold chief's waist from the corner of his eye. A fierce light flashed in the depths of his old eyes. All of a sudden, the black-clothed old man slapped the Black Demon Stronghold chief's chest. True chi surged in his palm. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Bang! The Black Demon Stronghold chief was sent flying on the spot as blood spurted out of his mouth. Not only was his chest torn open, but it was also caved in. Even his heart had been shattered by the true chi. "You actually plotted against me?" The Black Demon Stronghold chief looked at the black-clothed old man in disbelief. The black-clothed old man chuckled and walked towards the Black Demon Stronghold chief step by step. He said indifferently, "Didn't you also want to kill me and take all these treasures for yourself? I just made the first move." The Black Demon Stronghold chief roared, "I didn't. I swear that I really wanted to split it equally with you. I'm not one of those idiots. Your tricks are useless against me. Besides, we've been together for so many years. Who knows you better than me? I can guess what you're thinking. You used Qin Feiyang and that beast to get rid of everyone. You said that you wanted to split the treasures equally with me, but in reality, you already wanted to kill me. If I'm not wrong, after killing Qin Feiyang and the rest, you'll plot against me immediately. Am I right?" The corners of the black-clothed old man's mouth curled up slightly with a hint of mockery. "Listen carefully. I didn't," the Black Demon Stronghold chief roared. "We're all the same kind of people. For money, we'll do anything. Why be so hypocritical? But now it doesn't matter whether I did or not. Because I'm going to take this treasure. After killing you, I'll slowly deal with Qin Feiyang and that beast." The black-clothed old man's eyes surged with killing intent. His true chi surged and covered his fist as he punched out with all his might. The stronghold chief was about to die under his fist. He suddenly reached out and grabbed the black-clothed old man's arm tightly. At the same time, the dagger hidden in his sleeve stabbed into the black-clothed old man's lower abdomen at lightning speed. "Ah!" The black-clothed old man screamed and kicked the Black Demon Stronghold chief. Bang! Bang! At that moment, the Black Fiend's Stronghold master rolled down the mountain like a rubber ball. "The dagger is ready. You still say that you don't want to kill me?" The black-clothed old man looked down at the dagger in his lower abdomen and was instantly enraged. He endured the excruciating pain and charged toward the Black Demon Stronghold chief with a murderous aura. Ow! However, at this moment, a wolf howl exploded in the forest not far away. The black-clothed old man stopped in his tracks and looked in the direction of the sound. he saw Qin Feiyang and Wolf King galloping toward him. He lowered his head again and looked at the Black Demon Stronghold chief who was rolling down the mountain. His gaze was extremely gloomy. If he chased after him at this moment and snatched the cosmic bag, he would definitely bump into Qin Feiyang. If he was not injured, he would not be afraid. He could kill the man and wolf with a wave of his hand. But now, the dagger in his lower abdomen prevented him from using his true qi. He could not even unleash half of his strength. He looked at Qin Feiyang again. Although he was only a 7-star martial artist, he must have some extraordinary means to be able to deal with the 51 killers. The black-clothed old man weighed the pros and cons and realized that he did not have the courage to go down. Damn it! He cursed angrily and decisively turned around. He went down the mountain from the other side and quickly fled into the forest, disappearing. Although he desired the treasures in the cosmic bag, he cared more about his own life. Bam! The Black Demon Stronghold chief rolled to the side of a large rock. His life fluctuations were quickly dissipating. After Qin Feiyang ran here, he said to Wolf King, "Quickly go up and see if that old dog has escaped far away." Wolf King nodded and immediately ran up the mountain. Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze and looked down at the Black Demon Stronghold chief. "I was just thinking if I should give up on killing you. I didn't expect such a good show to happen. Haven't you heard of the saying that when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits?" He pulled down the cosmic bag and weighed it in his hand. He grinned and said, "Thank you, chief." Then he got up and walked up the mountain. But the Black Demon Stronghold chief suddenly reached out and grabbed his ankle. Qin Feiyang looked back and frowned. "Do you want me to give you a quick death?" "Qin Feiyang, please do me a favor." The Black Demon Stronghold chief begged intermittently. "Not interested." Qin Feiyang said indifferently. "I am a dying man. Please do me a favor, okay?" The Black Demon Stronghold chief looked at him pleadingly. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, "What favor?" "There is a jade pendant on my neck. Please help me send it to the martial arts hall. You must personally hand it to a person called Chao Lang. When he sees the jade pendant, he will know that I was not killed by you." The chief of the Black Demon Stronghold used over 20 breaths to finish such a short sentence. After finishing, he fell to the ground and died. Martial arts hall? Qin Feiyang frowned. Wasn't this person an assassin? How could he be related to the martial arts hall? Who was this Chao Lang? At this time, Wolf King ran down the mountain and shook his head at Qin Feiyang. "He is seriously injured and can't run far. Bury him first." Qin Feiyang turned around and walked a few steps, punching the ground with all his strength. Boom! Dust and smoke immediately rose from this place, and a 2-meter-deep crater was revealed. Then, Qin Feiyang came to the Black Demon Stronghold chief's side and pulled open his clothes. There was really a jade pendant hanging on his neck. The jade pendant was dark green and looked simple and unadorned. It didn't look like a treasure. He grabbed the jade pendant and pulled it off. He looked at it in front of his eyes for a while, but he still couldn't figure it out. He put it in his trouser pocket, picked up the Black Demon Stronghold chief's body, and put it in the deep pit. Alas, don't be an assassin in the next life. Qin Feiyang sighed. This incident gave him a great feeling. People's hearts were really sinister. From this, he also came to a conclusion. Never trust an assassin, let alone be friends with an assassin. Because it was self-destruction. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.